Hey guys, tonight we're heading deep into the sands of Timerite, into the painted halls and papyrus-scented air of ancient Egypt. Imagine the pink glow of dawn creeping over the Nile as herons glide low above the reeds. A chorus of frogs winds down while palm trees sway gently in the morning breeze. You lie on your thin reed mat, still half wrapped in dreams, as the call of the ibis echoes down from the rooftops. Welcome to your life as a scribe in the city of Wasset, known to the future as Thebes. You've trained for years in the scribe's house. Your hands are calloused in ways no farmer would understand, but the ink stains on your fingers carry their own kind of status. You're educated, literate, respected, but not quite rich. Which means, yes, you still have to wake up before the sun. Some things never change. The air is cool for now, but you already feel the promise of heat curled just beyond the horizon. You sit up slowly, brushing papyrus scraps from your thin robe, and stretch until your spine offers a satisfying crack. The room is quiet except for the faint cooing of doves nesting on your clay windowsill. You splash your face with water from a pottery jug. It's lukewarm and smells faintly of the river, but it'll do. You've trained for years in the scribe's house. Your hands are calloused in ways no farmer would understand, but the ink stains on your fingers carry their own kind of status. You're educated, literate, respected, but not quite rich. Which means, yes, you still have to wake up before the sun. Some things never change. You're not alone in your tiny scribe's quarters. The neighbor's daughter is already singing badly to herself in the courtyard below, and the old baker next door slams his oven shut with theatrical flair. A goat bleats, another goat bleats back. Somewhere, someone's arguing about onions again. You check the small offering bowl at your doorway, just a pinch of salt, and the date left for Thoth, god of writing. You mutter a sleepy prayer to him, part plea, part apology. Let my lines be straight, my ink flow steady, and may no temple cat sit on my scroll today. Last week one did. Saturday there for 10 whole minutes. You tried moving him. He blinked slowly, bit your stylus, and resumed his nap. There's a rustling outside your door. A runner from the temple shouts something about roll call starting early. You groan, half choke on a barley crumb, and fumble to tie your robe tighter. Time to face the day. You gather your Tulsa bundle of reeds, a block of soot ink, and a few precious scraps of new papyrus. Papyrus is expensive. You treat it like gold, which is ironic, considering scribes often record gold inventories for the treasury. As you step into the street, the sun begins its slow crawl above the horizon, casting long orange shadows across the clay walls. The scent of frankincense wafts faintly from a nearby altar. Someone dumps a basin of water out their window, nearly soaking your robe, but you sidestep it with the reflexes of someone who's learned to expect chaos before coffee. The Nile glitters in the distance, flanked by groves of date palms and boats lazily drifting along, their sails catching the first light like wings. It's quiet now, but in an hour, it'll be teeming fishermen shouting, merchants haggling, and somewhere, a cat knocking over something sacred. Historians still argue whether scribes like you had formal schedules or drifted from temple to town, depending on demand. Some believe you were on call for various priesthoods and officials. Others think there was a kind of rotating hierarchy. What's clear is that you're never short on worker on stories. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening from somewhere far away, let me know where and what time it is for you. I always love seeing how far these sleepy little journeys travel. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You pick up your pace. There's plenty of head scrolls to copy, cats to avoid, and an apprentice who still thinks Ra has a beard made of literal fire. You're halfway through a narrow alley, still rubbing sleep from your eyes, when the sweet smell of baking bread distracts you. A young boy waves a warm flat cake at you from his family's stall. He's probably hoping for a favor, maybe getting his father's land record bumped to the top of your scroll pile. You accept the bread with a conspiratorial wink, already mentally tallying the favor to be repaid. The game of give and take never really stops in this city, even before sunrise. The streets are slowly filling up now. You dodge a man herding a stubborn donkey and almost trip over a basket of onions someone left in the middle of the road, perhaps on purpose. You glance up at the flat roofs overhead, where early risers sip beer and fan themselves in the golden morning light. A woman tosses palm fronds down to her daughter below, who bundles them for weaving. Everywhere the city hums to life like a low, warm drum beat. Today, you're due at the House of Life per Ankh, the Scribe's domain tucked into the temple complex. But first, you pass through the outer markets, where vendors shout half-heartedly, and the air smells like cinnamon, old sandals, and possibly something recently deceased. A cat sprints past you, tail straight up, pursued by two noisy children and one extremely determined ibis. As you walk, you rehearse the day's tasks in your head. You'll need to check the records on temple offerings, correct yesterday's mistakes in the scribal ledgers, and maybe help that new apprentice learn the difference between sun and I. The hieroglyphs are similar, yes, but one implies divine glory, and the other accidentally makes a hymn to Ra sound like it's praising his optometrist. Your path veers toward the massive pylons of the temple itself, two towering gateways carved with scenes of Pharaoh defeating enemies who almost certainly weren't drawn to scale. The sandstone glows gold in the morning sun. You pause just outside the entrance, adjusting your wig. Ah yes, the wig. You'd think, as a professional, you could get used to it. But no, it's itchy. It traps heat, like a miniature oven strapped to your skull. And worst of all, it sheds. You're constantly plucking bits of it from your scrolls, your robes, and occasionally your food. Still, appearances matter. The shaved head underneath is more hygienic, but in temple society, a wig means dignity, education, and possibly an allergy to common sense. You smooth your linen robe and shift your writing kit under your arm. The ink cake is already softening from the heat, which means your hands will be sticky by the time you finish the morning roll call. Delightful. You murmur a quick prayer to Thothnot, your first of the day, and definitely not your last in step through the temple gate. Inside, the world quiets. The thick stone walls mute the outside chaos. The floor is cool beneath your sandals, and the scent of incense hangs heavy in the air. A procession of junior priests passes by, one of them carrying a tray of lotus blossoms. Another trips slightly, and a few petals flutter to the ground. You bend down and tuck one behind your ear. No one notices. You're not sure if it's sacrilegious or just stylish. The temple courtyard is already bustling with scribes and officials. You spot Nebamhat, your closest colleague and part-time rival, hunched over a scroll with his usual intensity. He waves without looking up, muttering something about grain taxes. You'll check on him later once he's worked himself into a full existential spiral about barley yields again. For now, you head toward the archive chamber at the rear of the courtyard, where the scrolls sleep in neatly bundled rows. The chamber smells like old dust and older leather bindings. You love it here. This is your domain. The scratching of styluses on papyrus, the faint rustle of linen robes, the occasional snore from the priest who insists the storage bench is his thinking spot. This is home. You settle into your usual seat, a low wooden stool by the open window, and unpack your tools with care. Ink, reeds, fresh scrolls. You always start with a few warm-up, lines common hymns, or wisdom sayings to get your hands steady. Today, your first line is a favorite. Do not spend your heart on vanity, for what is left is forgotten, timeless, depressing. But the symmetry of the glyphs comforts you. As you finish your practice lines, a breeze stirs through the chamber, rustling the scrolls and cooling the sweat gathering at the back of your neck. You exhale slowly, centering yourself. Soon, the roll call will begin, and your real duties will demand attention. But for this one quiet moment, you simply sit, feeling the sunlight graze your shoulder and the ink pool gently in its dish. Historians still argue whether scribes like you worked primarily for religious purposes or administrative ones. Most likely, it was a blend of both. After all, the gods needed their offerings counted, just as much as the state needed its tax recorded. In ancient Egypt, paperwork was sacred. You're about to dip your reed into the ink again when someone shouts your name across the courtyard. It's time. You sigh, tucking your scroll away. Another day, another endless list of names, excuses, and "I swear my neighbor has more goats than me" protests. But hey, at least you got a free flat cake out of it this morning. Roll call begins, as it always does. with far too many people pretending they were here all along. You take your seat at the side of the temple courtyard, read stylus in hand, and eye the line forming in front of you. There's already a farmer with sunburnt cheeks arguing that he delivered 3 baskets of lentils, not 2. Next is a perfume merchant trying to whisper his way into a tax discount. And behind him, a very sweaty man clutching what appears to be a live goose. You sigh. This will take a while. Your job is deceptively simple. Record the names, the offerings, the taxes, the complaints, whatever needs writing down so it doesn't get lost in the chaos. But of course, nothing in ancient Egypt is ever simple. For every honest goat herder, there's someone claiming the Nile ate his boat or that a crocodile stole his paperwork. You scratch out names on a long scroll with practiced ease, your stylus gliding over the papyrus like a tiny oar skimming a calm river. You pause now and then to blot the ink or flick a beetle off the table. Nebamhat leans over your shoulder to mutter a joke about a man who once tried to bribe a scribe with pickled fish. You chuckle softly. It worked, if you recall. A priest walks by carrying a jar of sacred oil. You wonder if anyone's told him it's leaking slightly. You decide not to. There's a kind of hierarchy in temples, and while scribes are respected, correcting a priest's oil spill is not within your pay grade. The goose man finally reaches the front. He holds out the bird with a hopeful smile. It's a gift, he says, for the temple gods. The goose honks loudly in protest, which seems like a reasonable reaction. You raise an eyebrow. Did the gods ask for it alive? He shrugs. I thought they might like the freshness. You dutifully jot it down. 1 goose, possibly divine, still honking. Somewhere nearby, another scribe is reciting a list of temple donations. You hear the words incense, beer, and 1 well-behaved cat. You're not sure whether that last one was a joke or a miracle. You scan your own list again: 2 jars of honey, 5 sacks of emmer wheat, 3 bolts of linen, 1 small child offering a shell he found that looks like a beetle but isn't. Children love to bring you things. You keep a growing collection on the corner of your desk. Oddly shaped rocks, faded flower petals, 1/2 of a scarab beetle. You once received a lizard tail wrapped in linen. Still haven't figured that one out. The sun has climbed higher now, and the courtyard is sweltering. You wipe your forehead with your sleeve and try not to smudge the fresh ink. The breeze has died, replaced by the low drone of flies and the occasional bark of a dog chasing its tail in the distance. You glance around at your fellow scribes. Some are writing furiously, others clearly daydreaming. Nebamhat is already on his 2nd mug of beer, which means you'll probably have to double check his entries later for accidental poetry. He tends to get metaphysical after mid-morning. Historians still debate whether temple scribes like you kept personal records in addition to official ones. Some suggest secret diaries were tucked between Ledger's little scrolls of gossip, family feuds, and which priest always forgot to pay his incense dues. You'd like to believe that. Sometimes you do write down things just for yourself: small sketches, funny phrases, the occasional haiku about goats. No one needs to know. The line in front of you is finally thinning. A final merchant sets down a small bundle of dried fish with a dramatic flourish. You nod, note it on the scroll, and wave him along. Your wrist aches, your lower back protests, and you're pretty sure you've developed a permanent ink smudge on your left cheek. You stand, stretching slowly, and wince as your knees crack audibly. Time for a break. You slip the finished scroll into a reed basket, tie it neatly with cord, and label it Offerings, 4th month of Shemu. Then you walk to the edge of the temple courtyard and peer out toward the sacred lake glimmering in the distance. The water's surface ripples gently in the breeze. A heron lifts off with a quiet rustle. You wish you could just sit there all afternoon, toes dipped in the cool shallows, listening to the reeds murmur secrets to each other. But alas, duty calls. A young apprentice sprints across the courtyard towards you, scroll flapping wildly in one hand. "Master!" he gasps, skidding to a halt. The papyrus storeroom is flooding again. Of course it is. You nod solemnly, wave goodbye to your quiet moment, and prepare to rescue the temple's precious scrolls from yet another watery disaster. You glance up at the sun as you follow him. Still hours to go before lunch. Still half a day's worth of writing ahead. Still, at least it's not goose duty. The storeroom smells like damp papyrus, despair, and something faintly herbal, maybe last week's spilled embalming fluid. You step gingerly over a puddle, pulling around a clay pot that's cracked in 3 places, and sigh. The apprentice, still breathing like a startled gazelle, gestures wildly toward a shelf where several scrolls now sit like half-sunken boats in a shallow swamp. You immediately lift the nearest bundle out of the water, fingers brushing over the fragile reed fibers. It's salvageable barely. You cradle the scroll in both hands, holding it as delicately as if it were a newborn crocodile, which, in fairness, would be easier to handle right now. Did no one think to move them when the flooding started, you ask? The apprentice looks as if you've asked him to recite the entire Book of the Dead backwards. I thought the water would stop. You close your eyes. The Nile doesn't stop, Patouf. To be fair, the flooding isn't his fault. The storeroom is on the lower level, just close enough to the sacred lake that every rising tide or enthusiastic rainstorm likes to say hello. Still, that hasn't stopped the priest from insisting it's the ideal place to store the less sacred scrolls be, which they mean anything that isn't about gods smiting people or kings winning battles. They almost certainly didn't attend. You and Hatuf spend the next hour shifting bundles to higher shelves, using linen rags to blot moisture, and laying out wet scrolls to dry in the courtyard sun. You mutter curses in Old Egyptian under your breath, mostly just nouns, hippopotamus, mud, lemon juice, anything to keep yourself from slipping into profanity. Meanwhile, Hatuf chatters on mostly questions. Why do scribes use black and red ink? Do crocodiles ever really eat scrolls? Have you ever met a ghost in the temple? You answer in order. Black for words, red for magic. Yes, but they spit them back out, and only once, and you think it was just Nebamhat in a linen sheet after too much date wine. By midday, the papyrus is drying, Hatuf has stopped asking questions, and you finally have a moment to sit. You perch on a bench near the edge of the courtyard, breathing in the heat and chalky dust, letting the bustle of the temple swirl around you like a tide. Somewhere nearby, a priest is chanting prayers to Hathor, his voice deep and rhythmic, like a lullaby sung by someone who's been awake since last festival season. A servant walks past, balancing a tray of dates and pomegranate seeds. Your stomach growls, embarrassingly loud. Hatuf snorts. You pull out a fresh scroll and decide to use your break to work on one of your side projects, your collection of amusing mistakes made by apprentices. Your current favorite, a copy of a royal decree in which the apprentice, attempting to praise Pharaoh's radiant majesty, accidentally wrote flatulence of the horizon. You still laugh every time. Historians still argue whether such records collections of humor, private musings, even small gossip scrolls were commonly kept by scribes, or are just anomalies that survived time's great eraser. But from your bench in the temple sun, you feel fairly certain if you don't write it down, someone will just make it worse in retelling. And some things, like a goose interrupting a prayer service, deserve to be remembered exactly as they happened. After a short rest, you're summoned to assist with copying a royal communication. You gather your tools again, tucking them back into your writing satchel, and follow a senior scribe to the cool shaded archive room near the temple's innermost sanctum. Inside, the air is still and heavy with incense. A large table stands at the center, a pristine scroll spread across its surface. This is no market tally or offering list. This is the real deal. A letter from Pharaoh's court, written in elegant script and adorned with the royal seal, requesting that this temple provide an updated count of stored grain and, oddly, the current number of trained dancers available for festival service. You don't ask, you just copy. The work is careful, deliberate. You grind the ink with water, testing its consistency, and then dip your stylus. Each glyph must be clear, sharp, and symmetrical. No smudges, no hesitation. You lose track of time as the signs unfold beneath your hand grain: dancer, supply, offering, glory, Nile, Pharaoh. You finish with a flourish, sprinkle a bit of sand to dry the ink, and hand it off for sealing. There's something deeply satisfying about Ida letter to the heart of the kingdom, bearing your hand, your art. You may not wear gold jewelry or carry a soldier's blade, but your words move across miles, whispering order into a chaotic world. By the time you return to your seat, the sun has shifted, casting long shadows across the courtyard. The scent of roasting fish drifts in from the temple kitchens, and the buzz of cicadas fills the air like a lullaby. You stretch again, roll your shoulders, and take a deep breath. One day, 100 years from now, someone might find one of your scrolls. They might run their fingers over the ink, tilt their head, and wonder who you were. Hopefully not the goose scroll, but knowing your luck, probably the goose scroll. You're awakened the next morning by the sound of someone yelling about onions. It takes a few groggy blinks before you realize it's not a dream. Through the narrow window of your scribe's chamber, just off the temple's eastern wall, you hear two voices locked in battle over the rightful owner of a sack of onions left on the temple steps during the pre-dawn hour. You sit up slowly, rubbing your face. Your mat crackles beneath you, stiff from another human night. A bowl of barley porridge sits near the doorway, lukewarm now, and slightly invaded by a small ant parade. You flick the ants away and eat it anyway. Life as a scribe may be prestigious, but it's still barley every morning. Outside, the temple complex is already awake. Priests chant morning prayers to Ra as the sun crests over the low mud brick walls. You rise, stretch your limbs with all the grace of a slightly arthritic heron, and head toward your work area. Today promises to be another long one and full of surprises. You're greeted by Nebamhat, who holds up a palm-sized object with the pride of a man unveiling a royal jewel. "Guess what I found buried under a stack of ledgers," he says. You squint at it. It appears to be a small wooden figurine of a frog, its painted eyes slightly crossed. A household deity? You guess? He nods. Or someone's misplaced good luck charm. I'm naming him Hedeb. He's now our patron of not losing ink pots. You place Hetep on your workbench, where he sits, slightly lopsided, between two reed pens. You pat his head for luck before turning to the day's first task, transcribing a rather dense treatise on the proper handling of sacred oils. Riveting stuff. As you begin writing, your thoughts drift. There's a rhythm to this work, the glide of the stylus, the scratch of reed on papyrus, the way the symbols bloom like tiny boat sails catching wind. It's not thrilling, but it's peaceful and, in its own way, beautiful. You pause to shake out your cramped wrist and glance over at Nebamhat. He's drawing a suspiciously artistic interpretation of Hathor that looks more like a festival dancer than a goddess of motherhood. You raise an eyebrow. He just shrugs. She's having a good day. Historians still argue whether scribes were allowed creative liberties with temple illustrations. Some scrolls show surprising flare-curled feathers, smirking baboons, even one ibis wearing what looks suspiciously like a wig. You like to believe that, yes, you were allowed to have a little fun, especially when no one was watching. As midday approaches, your routine is broken by a soft thud, followed by a louder thudend, finally a full crash. You both look up. Hatuf, the ever-enthusiastic apprentice, stands in the doorway covered in what can only be described as powdered ink and regret. I was organizing the archive, he offers sheepishly, but the top shelf disagreed. Behind him lies a small disaster. Several scrolls, a broken jar of pigment, and a basket of drying reeds now scattered across the floor like spilled spaghetti. You sigh. At least it wasn't the sacred wine room. Nebamhat whispers, "Yet." You spend the next hour helping Hatuf restore order. Scrolls are restacked, ink is swept, and only one prayer is mumbled under your breath in the hope that the pigment didn't stain anything important. You send Hatuf to fetch fresh ink and, for good measure, suggest he walk very slowly. After the excitement dies down, you're summoned to a minor council meeting of temple scribes. These are regular affairs part planning, part bickering over stylus distribution, and part showing off the most legible handwriting. Today's meeting focuses on preparations for an upcoming festival honoring Baste, the cat-headed goddess of home, joy, and slightly terrifying feline justice. The temple's high priest wants a special hymn copied onto linen scrolls for ceremonial reading. You're one of the chosen scribes, mostly because your lettering is neat and you once spelled celestial tale without accidentally invoking a serpent demon. High praise. The work is tedious, but ceremonial the hymn speaks of feline guardians, divine meows, and the blessings of keeping rodents away from granaries. You suppress a smile as you write. Somewhere in the background, a real temple cat jumps onto a bench and stares at you as if to say, "Yes, worship me." You offer it a respectful nod. You're not about to offend Bastet's emissaries. By late afternoon, the linen scrolls are drying in the sun, and you finally allow yourself a short break. You wander out to the temple, gardens walled off from the city beyond, fragrant with lotus, papyrus reeds, and the faint musk of incense. You sit by a shallow pool and watch the ripples dance across the surface. A beetle skims the water, then plops in. A priest nearby hums a tune older than your grandmother's sandals. You lean back on your elbows, eyes half closed, the weight of the day softening into a kind of lazy warmth. There's something deeply satisfying about this life knot. Glorious, not dramatic, but full of small, sturdy moments. A good copy, a dry scroll, a slightly crooked frog statue bringing luck, and maybe, just maybe, a goose that doesn't honk. The sun rises heavy and golden, painting the temple walls in amber. You're already awake thanks to a particularly persistent fly-end, sipping a cup of diluted date wine, hoping it'll chase away the stiffness in your shoulders. Today, you've been assigned to assist with the temple's census scrolls, which you're fairly certain is a polite way of saying, you'll be writing the word goat over and over for 7 hours. You head toward the courtyard where the scribal table has been moved for the morning better light, they say, as if the light will make the numbers any more interesting. Nebumhat is already there, rubbing his eyes and muttering something about grain to goat ratios and the lack of appropriate snacks. A few villagers linger nearby with baskets of offerings, animals in tow, and children pointing excitedly at the sacred ibis statue. It's census season when the temples account for the offerings and contributions of the people and, more importantly, how many goats, jars of honey, or bolts of linen they can claim without argument. You pick up your stylus and the first tally scroll, its surface already inked with the tidy scribblings of yesterday's entries. 6 goats, the priest calls out. One appears to be borrowed. You blink. Borrowed? The priest shrugs. He said it belongs to his cousin. In theory. You write 6 goats, 5 confirmed, 1 tentative. You're not paid to argue with goats. Hours pass. The scroll lengthens. More villagers arrive offering everything from fresh fish to perfumed oil to a single jar of pickled turnips, which you're not sure even qualifies as a meaningful gift to the gods. A boy offers a baby duck. The priest stares at it. You scribble 1 duck unrequested. This is, after all, part of temple life. You're not just a scribe. You're a record keeper of the absurd. You once copied a complaint about a neighbor's rooster crowing at inappropriate lunar hours. That one made it all the way into the archives. Historians still argue whether these administrative documents were dry bureaucracy or subtle reflections of daily life, tiny windows into how people truly lived. You, personally, find the answer obvious. If people are writing down that someone gifted the temple a melon that smelled suspicious, then yes, this is history. Midday approaches. The sun climbs, relentless. Someone offers a large jar of beer as tribute. The priest hesitates mostly because it's clearly half drunk. You log it anyway. 1 jar beer, consumed. Nebumhat leans over. Remember when we thought being a scribe meant writing great epics? You nod, staring at a note that reads, 2 geese, both temperamental. He sighs. We're living the dream. Despite the monotony, there's a rhythm to the task. People come, they mumble, they smile nervously, they hand over jars and livestock and the occasional wilted herb. You record it all, each entry another tiny stone in the great mosaic of the temple story. By late afternoon, the scroll is full. Your fingers are cramped, and the reed pen has worn to a soft, squeaky nub. You hand it off to a junior scribe for sealing, stretch until your spine gives a polite pop, and shuffle back inside. As you pass through the outer sanctum, a group of dancers rehearses quietly for the Bastet festival. They twirl in linen robes, their feet whispering over stone. The music is soft, just a harp and a rhythm tapped gently on a clay pot, but it floats through the hall like a breeze. You pause to watch, leaning against a cool pillar, letting the scent of incense and oil lull you. One dancer slips, regains her footing with a sheepish smile. You make a mental note possible inclusion in tomorrow's scroll titled Festival Rehearsal Casualties. You return to the scribe's quarters, where a low table waits with your afternoon assignment, translating a series of letters from a noblewoman in Thebes. These aren't state secrets or thrilling war reports. They're domestic complaints about rising fish prices, a dispute over garden boundaries, and a deeply personal note about her favorite hair oil being out of stock. You're riveted. These letters are as real as life gets, full of small frustrations and very specific praise for a type of almond cake. You transcribe her words with care, mimicking her tidy script and occasional flourishes. Her voice emerges in the lines sharp, funny, slightly dramatic. You imagine her waving her hands wildly as she dictates, servants ducking behind pillars to avoid being assigned impossible errands. One line catches your eye. Tell the priest that if the temple doesn't return my blue shawl, I will start praying elsewhere. You chuckle. Gods may be eternal, but temple loyalty is clearly negotiable. As the sun dips lower, casting long shadows across the temple's inner walls, you pause your work. Outside, children chase a reed ball, and the sound of laughter mixes with the gentle calls of doves nesting in the rafters. You look around at your tools, your scrolls, the slightly ridiculous frog figurine on the shelf and feel something close to peace. It's not a perfect life, but it's a steady one, and full of stories. You roll up the noblewoman's letter and place it in the basket for delivery. Then, with a final stretch, you stand, dust off your tunic, and nod to Nebemhat, who is now dozing gently over a scroll of tax records. You whisper, "Don't let the goats get you," and step quietly into the warm, amber air. You wake the next morning with ink on your face. Not metaphorically actual ink. A faint smudge on your cheek and a stripe down your arm like some half-finished hieroglyph. Apparently you fell asleep mid-edit again. The scroll beneath you is wrinkled and slightly damp from a bit of early morning drool. Very dignified. You sit up slowly, muscles aching in that familiar, "I've been hunched like a heron for 10 hours" way. The chamber is dim, but a sliver of morning light slices across the floor, revealing the faint outline of your sandal print in spilled charcoal dust. Today is market day. Normally, you wouldn't be involved, but a special request has come from the temple's overseer. Something about acquiring new papyrus rolls, replacement reeds, and more mysteriously a shipment of dried figs for the high priest's focus rituals. You're not entirely sure what kind of spiritual clarity figs provide, but you've long since stopped questioning divine dietary needs. You make your way through the waking temple, past sleepy priests stretching their arms, yawning novices carrying buckets of water, and one very determined temple cat dragging a lizard half its size. The air is already warm and smells faintly of baked bread and lotus smoke. Outside the gates, the city is bustling. The market sprawls across several dusty streets, woven canopies, shading stalls stacked high with goods, baskets of garlic, folded linen, perfumed oils, and more varieties of dates than you previously thought possible. Your assignment is simple: collect supplies, don't overpay, and try not to get distracted by the professional story shouters. You fail on that last part immediately. One man, wrapped in a striped sash, is dramatically reenacting a local myth involving a crocodile, 3 chickens, and the moon god's missing sandals. You pause just long enough to hear the crocodile speak in a falsetto, then shake yourself and move on. Focus. Papyrus. At the Scribe supply booth, you haggle gently over a bundle of writing reeds. The vendor claims they're blessed by Thoth himself. You point out the ink stains and splinters. Eventually, you settle on a reasonable price and a bonus pot of blue-black dye. He throws in a dried beetle shell for luck. You take it. While crossing the lane toward the papyrus stall, you hear a sharp argument behind you. A young woman is gesturing furiously at a basket of lentils, yelling that she paid for 2 scoops and received 1.5. The seller insists she blinked too long. The crowd watches with mild amusement, no one intervening. It's market theater at its finest. You return to the temple with your arms full and a decent sunburn developing on your neck. Inside the scriptorium, you drop the supplies onto the table where Hatuf is trying bliss him to clean the inkstone with sand. You gently nudge him aside before he destroys the smooth basin and show him the beetle shell. His eyes widen. "Is it magical?" You shrug. "Depends who you ask." Later, you're called to assist in a less glamorous task, copying inventory ledgers for the temple's granary. It's important work, though about as thrilling as watching barley ferment. But it must be done, every jar accounted for, every sheaf of wheat noted, every rat incident logged. Halfway through a line about suspected rodent activity near the southern wall, you pause, pen in midair. Do you think rats ever steal for sport? You ask Nebamhat, who's sitting nearby, sketching what he claims is a meditative ibis. He thinks about it. Only the smart ones. The others are probably working on unionizing. Historians still argue whether the granary records were truly accurate or padded to appease temple leaders. Some scrolls mention ghost grains offerings that never existed but somehow ended up counted. You like to imagine one tired scribe writing 20 imaginary jars just to see if anyone noticed. They probably didn't. The work goes on, scroll after scroll. You take breaks when you can, sipping date water, stretching your cramped fingers, and idly wondering if anyone's invented a back-friendly bench yet. Spoiler, they haven't. By late afternoon, a priest enters with a request. A nobleman has died, and the temple will be preparing the burial prayers. You're needed to draft a scroll of remembrance eulogies, hymns, and a brief list of the deceased's good deeds. You're given a short dossier. He donated land, funded a canal, and once stopped a flood by yelling at the water. You raise an eyebrow. That part's staying in. Nebamhat grins. With a doodle, I hope. You begin to write. The words must be reverent but not boring, poetic but specific. You describe his canal, how it turned dust into green. You mention the land, given freely. And yes, you include the flood incident because anyone bold enough to shout at the Nile deserves eternal mention. The sun begins to lower as you finish the final lines. You roll the scroll gently, tying it with linen and a dab of sweet oil. It smells like figs. Of course. You leave the scroll with the priests and step out into the twilight. The market's noise has faded, and a breeze stirs the date palms along the temple wall. You find a quiet bench in the garden beside the sacred pool and watch the water ripple beneath the fading light. The frog statue sits nearby, his eyes as lopsided as ever. You pat him on the head. Still better than accounting. You wake just before sunrise to the sound of gentle flutes drifting through the window slats. For once, it wasn't a fly or a rooster or a startled novice tripping over a broom-just music, slow and melodic, calling the temple to the morning purification ritual. You slip into a fresh tunic well. Fresh is generous. It's less wrinkled than yesterday's sand. Make your way toward the sacred lake for the ritual washing. The air is cool, and mist curls like quiet breath across the surface of the water. You spot a heron wading in the reeds, unbothered by the priests shuffling past in sleepy reverence. At the water's edge, you dip your hands, then your face, letting the chill shake the last of the night's grogginess from your bones. This morning you've been invited, some might say ropadento, helping prepare the text for a festival celebrating Hathor, the goddess of joy, love, and possibly excessive wine consumption. The preparations are in full swing. Temple dancers stretch in the colonnade, musicians tune their harps and flutes, and over by the altar, a very focused man is trying to attach tiny bells to a ceremonial cow headdress without stabbing himself with the sewing needle. You report to your post in the festival scriptorium, where your job is to inscribe hymns, blessings, and one particularly lengthy list of offerings. These will be recited during the ceremony, and as always, the gods are picky about spelling. The list begins with the usual: incense, wine, fresh bread, dates, garlands of lotus petals. Then it veers into the slightly extravagant gold beads, perfumed oil from Byblos, and one imported goose of unusual girth. You pause, quill hovering midair. Nebamhat leans over. They always order the deluxe goose for Hathor. It's tradition. You scribble dutifully. One goose, notable for girth. The hymns are old, passed down from papyrus to papyrus, voice to voice. You recopy verses praising Hathor's laughter, her silver mirror, her ability to turn a sour day sweet. One passage likens her to the perfume that dances before a breeze. You like that line. You write it slowly, carefully, letting the letters curl like smoke. Outside, preparations escalate. Priests polish statues. Flower girls rehearse their petal throws. A cook walks by muttering angrily about Too many honey cakes, not enough hands. The temple cat now called Sinet by popular consensus sits regally on a cushion and refuses to move, even when the musicians accidentally drop a drum beside her. You step out to stretch and find yourself next to a young acolyte nervously holding a tray of ritual wine. He's sweating more than the jug is. First festival, you ask? He nods. I don't know when to bow. You take pity. Just follow the high priest. If he bows, you bow. If he trips, you bow even faster. The ritual begins at midday. The sun blazes overhead, and the temple fills with the hum of chants, the jingling of dancers' belts, and the scent of crushed myrrh. The crowd watches as the golden statue of Hathor is carried out, its surface gleaming beneath a canopy of embroidered linen. You stand off to the side with the other scribes, scroll in hand, voice ready to prompt the reciters if they falter. And falter they do about 6 lines in. A young priest freezes on the word radiant, blurts out rabbit and blushes crimson. The crowd murmurs. You gently hold up the scroll. He recovers with a weak smile, nods in your direction, and continues. Historians still argue whether these temple festivals were purely religious or also a bit of sanctioned escapism, chance to eat, drink, dance, and collectively forget one's tax obligations for an afternoon. You suspect both are true. Looking around at the beaming faces, the children wide-eyed at the golden music, the elders nodding in time to the beat, you can almost see the thread that ties everyone together, divine or not. After the formal rites, the celebration spills into the courtyard. Musicians play faster now. Dancers twirl in bursts of color. Someone hands you a honey cake, and you take it gratefully, ignoring that it's slightly burned on one edge. You eat it anyway. It tastes like a sugary brick and also like triumph. A group of older women pulls a reluctant Nebamhat into a circle dance. He resists, stumbles, and then gives in, grinning wildly as he tries to mimic their steps. You applaud politely while pretending not to laugh. By sunset, the temple has taken on that golden glow again, softer now, a little sleepy. Offerings are tallied, scrolls stored, flower petals swept gently into baskets. You return to the scriptorium to finish your final task, recording the names of those who contributed to the festival. Everyone from noble patrons to a small boy who donated exactly 1 grape gets listed. You write the names with care, letting the ink flow like gratitude. These names will remain long after the honey cakes are gone, after the flowers fade, after even Senate decides to find a new sunny spot. You stretch your back, nod to the now silent scribe bench, and step outside. The courtyard is nearly empty. A faint trail of petals leads away into the darkness. Somewhere in the temple, someone starts humming a festival tune, soft and slow. You hum along, just under your breath, and follow the path of petals home. The next morning, you discover someone's borrowed your favorite quill and replaced it with a stub that's about as ergonomic as a twig. You hold it up like a crime scene clue, sigh and mutter something vaguely threatening about ink curses. Still, duty calls. Today you're assigned to help record omens. Yesamans. Not everyone in the temple takes them seriously, but the priests of the celestial wing are all in. They chart stars, measure bird flights, and catalog dreams submitted anonymously in little clay jars. Your job? Copy it all down in a ledger so thick you're convinced it's made of sandstone. You begin with the bird entries. A farmer reported seeing 3 ibises fly west at Deuce Auspicious. A soldier claims a hawk stared at him during breakfast neutral, possibly flattering. Then there's the slightly unhinged account of a goose wearing the face of my mother. You glance around to see if anyone's joking. No one is. You record it word for word. Next come the dreams. One describes sinking into a jar of honey and emerging as a beetle. Another involves dancing with the crocodile god Sobek, who wore earrings and sang like a reed flute. You raise an eyebrow and make a tiny note in the margin. Singer Sobek, recurring? Historians still debate whether dream omens were spiritual revelations or simply the result of eating too many figs before bed. The temple, of course, takes no chances. If a dream says the river will rise, offerings are made. If a dream warns of a beetle rebellion, you thank the dreamer, nod solemnly, and add inspect storeroom. You spend most of the day hunched over scrolls, recording these celestial dispatches. Between entries, you notice the omens sometimes seem contradictory. One dream predicts abundance, the next pestilence, but that's the beauty of ancient bureaucracy. Cover all your bases, and you're never wrong. Midday brings a surprise, a visit from a foreign envoy. He's from somewhere across the sea, his linen robe dyed deep indigo, his beard curled like a question mark. He speaks in a clipped accent and presents a gift to the temple, a strange artifact said to whisper at night. The priests examine it, poke it, sniff it. You're tasked with writing the official description. You scribble dutifully. Object of unknown use. Round, possibly a lid, possibly a noise-making lid. Later, you sketch it in the margin with tiny, skeptical eyes. The envoy departs, leaving behind the artifact and a faint smell of spice. You wonder if he made up the whispering part just to mess with the high priest. In the evening, you join the senior scribe Menenu to copy a celestial calendar. It's complicated, full of alignments and gods with overlapping responsibilities. Some govern whole constellations, others manage things like cool breezes or dreams involving boats. You marvel at the sheer administrative weight of the cosmos. Imagine being the god of light drizzle. You say absently. Menenu snorts. You'd be very busy in spring. As night falls, you step outside for air. The sky is clear, dotted with stars. The temple astronomer is already at work, using a notched stick and a string to align with the dog star. He's muttering numbers and occasionally shaking his head like the sky has personally offended him. You sit nearby, watching the constellations slowly shift. The stars here feel different from the ones back in your village closer, maybe, or just more listened to. A novice sits beside you. Do you think the stars care that we track them? She asks. You shrug. Maybe, or maybe they're just watching us back.
You walk back through the temple halls, past the wall where someone has drawn an anatomically questionable baboon, and back to your sleeping mat. You stretch out, your head still full of stars and omens and mystery artifacts. Just as you're drifting off, you remember, you forgot to return that borrowed quill. You smile in the dark. Revenge tomorrow. The next morning begins with a stealth mission. You tiptoe into the scriptorium before sunrise, your target clear, the person who stole your favorite quill. You've narrowed it down to 2 likely culprits, both of whom left behind tiny smudges on your scrolls yesterday. Rookie mistake. You examine each desk, finally spotting your quill tucked behind a jar of red ochre like a guilty secret. You retrieve it triumphantly. No note. No apology. Typical. You consider petty revenge. Perhaps an ink blot shaped like a scarab, or replacing their ink with dye that smells like fish. But you're a professional. Mostly. You settle for carving a tiny property of me mark on the shaft. Victory is its own reward. Today, your task shifts again. You're assigned to the House of Healing, the temple's medical wing. It's quieter than the rest of the temple, with a clean, herb-scented breeze drifting through the high windows. There's a serene rhythm to the place. Low voices, measured steps, the occasional grunt from a patient stretching too far too soon. You're not here to treat anyone. No need to worry about leeches or incantations, but to help record treatments and update the index of cures. The scrolls are as diverse as they are strange. Some recommend honey and prayer. Others call for crocodile fat, stale beer, or anointing the affected area with fermented date paste while chanting the name of a protective deity. One remedy for headaches involves holding a fish against the temple, your temple, not the building, while reciting a specific hymn backwards. You look at the page. Then you look at the fish in the jar nearby. You quietly hope no one asks for this particular service today. As you work, you learn a bit more about the healers. One is a stern woman named Tedishuri who wears 7 amulets and keeps her herbs in little labeled jars. Another, a balding man with perpetually stained fingers, brews medicinal beer that smells like overripe plums and regret. They argue gently over whether a patient needs more poppy juice or fewer visitors. Historians still argue whether ancient Egyptian medicine was primarily practical or symbolic. The answer, you suspect, is both. Honey does fight infection. So do copper salts. But so might a whispered spell and a warm hand on your forehead. And when in doubt, poppy juice. You help transcribe a set of case notes from earlier in the week. A merchant with a broken arm, cam-related, a scribe with insomnia, scroll-induced, and a baker with an impressive rash. Probably not wheat-related, but still unfortunate. The most unusual entry of the day is a woman who arrived claiming her heart felt full of bees. This turned out not to be metaphorical. She'd been stung 5 times during a temple offering gone wrong. The bees, it seems, were not appeased by her honey cakes. You write it down. Heart full of bees. Prescribed cooling balm, solitude, and respectful distance from hives. Around midday, a child is brought in with a nasty scrape on her leg. You watch as Tedashri gently cleans the wound, applies a poultice, and murmurs something about Sekhmet's breath blowing healing across the skin. The girl nods solemnly, then promptly falls asleep. Later, you help copy down the so-called Book of Wounds, an ancient scroll detailing different types of injuries and their meanings. Some are oddly poetic. A cut on the left arm may indicate betrayal. A twisted ankle, reluctance to move forward in life. A pimple between the eyebrows? Possibly divine irritation. Possibly just a pimple. There's also a long section on scorpion stings, complete with drawings. You note grimly that the drawings are more expressive than the scorpions probably would. By evening, your hands smell faintly of frankincense and vinegar, and your mind feels full of remedies. You wander back to your chamber through a corridor lined with painted tiles. One shows a figure pouring water from a pitcher, stars flowing from the stream. Another shows a man sneezing into a cloth, which you're pretty sure is the oldest illustration of allergies ever created. Outside, the sun dips low, casting the walls in molten gold. A few patients sit in the garden courtyard, resting beneath fig trees. One waves at you lazily. You wave back. As you pass the herb garden, you hear someone muttering to a basil plant. You pause, curious. I said grow, you stubborn leaf. It's the medicinal beer guy. He glares at the plant, then notices you. It listens better when threatened, he says seriously. You nod. I find that works on quills, too. You return to your quarters, your brain oddly soothed by the mixture of herbs, humors, and human oddity. For all the mystical chanting and divine appeals, healing seems to come down to the same ancient magic as always: care, time, and someone who remembers your name. You fall asleep dreaming of fish against foreheads, bees in hearts, and Sekhmet blowing warm breath across the world.
The sun rises a little more golden than usual, and you wake with basil still on your mind. Today, you're summoned to help with one of the temple's more logistically complex rituals, a purification ceremony involving music, incense, sacred recitations, and approximately 73 objects that must be arranged in precise, cosmically significant positions. You know this because the high priest read the list out loud, twice, and neither time made it sound any less baffling. Your role? Official assistant to the assistant ritual scribe. Which mostly means you carry scrolls, nod earnestly, and make sure no one accidentally places the papyrus reed where the lotus blossom is supposed to go. It has happened before. The ceremony is to honor Ma'at, the goddess of truth, balance, and cosmic order. You begin by helping set up the inner chamber. The floors are scrubbed, the statues dusted, and a junior priest polishes the eyeballs of a falcon-headed idol with a bit of linen. For clarity, he says solemnly. You're handed a scroll listing ceremonial phrases and their accompanying gestures. One section is entirely devoted to which direction to bow in depending on whether the incense is burning sandalwood, myrrh, or mysterious blend number 4. You reread that part. The mystery, it seems, is part of the spiritual experience. The drummers arrive next, young novices with tight braids and polished instruments. One practices a gentle rhythm that sounds like rain on a distant roof. Another holds her drum sideways and beats it with the same intensity usually reserved for bread making. A supervising priest gives her a look. She tones it down. As you help unfurl the final tapestry, you catch sight of the temple's sacred ibis, strutting through the courtyard like it owns the place. Which, in a way, it does. The ibis is considered an earthly avatar of Thoth, god of wisdom and writing. You try not to take it personally when it glares at your sandals. Soon, the ceremony begins, smoke curls into the rafters. The music starts, soft flutes, slow drumming. Priests chant ancient phrases in a rhythm so steady it feels like being rocked to sleep. You follow the proceedings with your scroll, eyes darting from the text to the actions, checking each motion, right hand raised, bowl turned clockwise, phrase repeated 3 times. Historians still argue whether these rituals had an actual impact on the state or the weather, but what's clear is their psychological power. The moment you step into the rhythm, your mind quiets. There's something soothing in the repetition, the symbols, the incense that clings to your skin like time itself. As the ceremony ends, the high priest anoints each object with drops of perfumed oil, then nods at the assembly. Everyone bows. You follow suit, your spine aching slightly from standing so still. It's a small price to pay for cosmic order. Afterwards, you help carry the ceremonial items back to the storage chamber, a cool, shadowy room lined with shelves holding everything from divine spoons to feathered fans to a set of very judgmental-looking cat statues. You wonder, briefly, if the gods ever lose track of their things. Has anyone seen my sun disk? Did we leave the afterlife scale in the vestibule again? Back in the courtyard, the scent of burnt myrrh lingers in your nose. A novice walks past, her hair covered in tiny golden beads that chime faintly as she moves. Another is carrying the ritual scroll you transcribed earlier. You can tell it's yours because of a tiny ink smudge in the corner, your accidental signature. By midday, the temple returns to its usual rhythm. You're given time to rest, but you find yourself too wired from the ceremony to nap. So you wander, past the Hall of Offerings, where a goat is bleating dramatically. Past the papyrus garden, where a group of scribes are practicing their hieratic shorthand. One of them is trying to draw a goose in 3 strokes. It looks more like a melon. They sigh. You end up by the temple's oldest wall, carved with faded images of gods that no one quite remembers anymore. You trace a finger over one of them, a figure with a fish head and 6 arms, dancing beside a loaf of bread. No one knows his name. You like that. You sit there a while, in the shade, thinking about Ma'at, balance. Order. Truth, not easy things to live by when your sandals chafe and your ink runs and the ibis keeps giving you side-eye, but maybe that's the point. Maybe Ma'at isn't about being perfect. Maybe it's just about showing up every day, doing your part, and making sure the lotus doesn't go where the papyrus should. That night, you lie on your mat and close your eyes. You smell incense, faint and ghostly. You hear drumming in your memory, like a heartbeat far away, and just before sleep claims you, you whisper one of the ritual phrases to yourself, not because you have to, but because it feels right. You're awoken at dawn by something scratching at your chamber door. For a fleeting moment, you imagine it's the ibis again, come to exact divine retribution for all your internal sarcasm. But when you crack open the door, you find it's just a temple cat. She strolls in like she owns the place, sniffs your scroll basket, curls up on your sleeping mat, and promptly begins snoring. You let her stay. No one wins a battle of will with a cat, especially one worshipped as sacred. Today's assignment takes you to one of the temple's more peculiar corners, the archives of celestial omens. This part of the temple doesn't smell like ink or myrrh. It smells faintly of dust, old beeswax, and that particular brand of silence only found around things people don't fully understand. The archivist is a man named Neferhotep. He's wiry, mostly bald, and looks like he hasn't blinked in 20 years. His robes are blue and gray and oddly stiff, like they've absorbed too much starlight. You're here to copy sky charts, he says, and waves you toward a low bench. You settle in beside a stack of star maps, some on papyrus, others etched into thin slates of limestone. There are diagrams of constellations shaped like crocodiles, knives, lotus blossoms, and, most unsettlingly, one simply labeled, the Moaning One. You decide not to ask. Your job is to reproduce the charts while recording current conditions, moon phase, cloud cover, the behavior of temple birds at dawn. Apparently, if a goose honks 3 times while facing west, something deeply meaningful is happening. Or about to happen. Or should be avoided at all costs. You ask Neferhotep for clarification. He peers at you as though you've asked why sand is dry. No one truly knows, he whispers. That's why we write it all down. You nod solemnly and note, goose honked once. Then tripped over own feet. As the morning passes, you become quietly enchanted by the maps. Ancient Egyptians didn't just look at the stars, they read them, whispered to them, tried to understand the divine clockwork behind the sky. The Decans, 36 groups of stars that rise at intervals through the night, were used to track time in the absence of sun. One scroll shows how the Decans rise behind the goddess Nut's body each night, like divine sparks traveling through her spine. Historians still argue whether these celestial records were used more for agriculture or prophecy. Probably both. If you know when the Nile will flood, that's useful. But if you also suspect your neighbor might be cursed because Jupiter's out of alignment? That's temple-worthy intel. Neferhotep hands you a particularly old chart that includes little drawings of what celestial events might mean. Red glow in east equals unexpected birth. Comet over southern horizon equals argument between hippo gods. Double moon halos equals do not trust bakers. You raise an eyebrow. Bakers? Neferhotep nods. Some bakers. By midday, your fingers are stained with blue ink and your neck aches from looking up, then down, then up again. A hawk glides overhead, and Neferhotep casually records it in a column labeled air signs. He hums a tune that sounds suspiciously like last night's temple drumbeat. Later, a group of initiates join you to practice star walking, a meditative pacing exercise where you walk in slow circles beneath the open sky while reciting the names of specific constellations. You try to focus, but the cat from earlier has followed you here and keeps curling around your ankles mid-stride. You finally give up and carry her, says one initiate. You've chosen your guiding spirit. You look down at the very unbothered, purring creature. Sure. Why not? That afternoon, you assist in copying the calendar of unlucky days. Each entry includes a short warning: do not wash your hair. The gods are watching. Avoid making sandals. Mischief may follow. Stay indoors. Ghosts enjoy heat. You ask Neferhotep how accurate the warnings are. He shrugs. Still better than the weather priests. At sunset, you step outside the archives and stretch. The sky is a riot of gold and violet. You can just make out the first twinkle of Sa, the constellation associated with Osiris. The Decans are waking. You lie back on a warm patch of stone, the cat purring on your chest. The stars above blink, swirl, breathe. You realize the ancients didn't just name the stars, they trusted them. Charted them. Found peace in their patterns. You don't fully understand the system. You're not even sure Neferhotep does. But there's something calming in the attempt, in the act of sitting still, looking up, and saying, I see you. You whisper to the sky, do not trust bakers. The cat flicks her tail in approval. By now, the temple feels like its own little universe, complete with its own climate, calendar, and internal logic, one that requires you to memorize 17 different meanings for a goose's honk. This morning, however, you're pulled from star charts and symbolic birds for something far more down-to-earth, helping prepare for the festival of Opet. You've heard of it before, one of the grand celebrations where Ammonius, the temple's chief deity, is honored with processions, music, food, and enough incense to choke a minor deity. But you've never been behind the scenes, much less involved. Your task begins modestly, polishing a ceremonial or, yes, an oar. Because, during Opet, the god's image is placed on a beautifully crafted boat, called a bark, and ceremonially floated down the Nile between Karnak and Luxor. It's supposed to represent divine unity and cosmic rebirth. But it's also a logistical challenge involving ropes, barges, several dozen sweaty priests, and at least one very confused goose that wandered aboard last year. As you polish, a senior attendant tells you about the origins of the festival. In the old days, she explains, people believed the Nile carried the god's blessings to the people. So, we send the god to visit. Like an emperor on tour. But with more feathers. She's not wrong. You soon help prepare the shrine that will house Ammonius' golden statue during the journey. It's lined with lapis and carved wood, inlaid with semi-precious stones. You wonder who designed it. Some artisan lost to time, quietly immortalized in a boat no one's allowed to sneeze near. In the courtyard, rehearsals are underway. Musicians warm up with flutes and sistrums, dancers practice slow, sweeping movements meant to imitate reeds swaying in the Nile. You try to stay out of the way and mostly succeed, until you trip over a trailing sash and knock a basket of flower garlands onto a passing official. You apologize so many times he eventually waves you off just to escape. By midday, the temple is buzzing. Not loudly, this is Egypt, and reverence is an art form, but with the soft rhythm of people preparing for something sacred and enormous. You help hang garlands along the cloisters. They're woven from lotus, papyrus, and a flower someone insists is good luck if placed at eye level, but bad luck if it droops. You adjust it upward. Just in case. One of the more peculiar aspects of the festival is the inclusion of oracles. Before the procession begins, priests ask Ammonius questions, then interpret his answers based on the sway of the shrine or the positioning of shadows. Today's big question is, should the harvest proceed early this year? Historians still argue whether these oracular movements were spontaneous or, well, helped along. The records are vague. The god wobbled meaningfully leaves much to interpretation. You find yourself swept up in the preparations, passing messages, checking supplies, re-inking a banner that reads something like, Ammonius blesses the shorelands, though your script accidentally swaps two glyphs and briefly renders it, Ammonius tickles the shorelands. You catch the mistake. Probably. By late afternoon, you help carry votive offerings, small clay figurines, pomegranates, bundles of linen, and the occasional oddity like a sculpted fish holding a torch. You're told it symbolizes guidance. Or dinner. The answer changes depending on who you ask. As the sun dips low, the statue of Ammonius is carefully lifted from its sanctum. Dozens of priests chant as it's carried onto the bark, which glows in the fading light, gold and lapis shimmering with that unmistakable drama only Egypt can conjure. Crowds gather along the banks. Children throw lotus petals, old women weep quietly, and even the temple cat, yes, she's followed you again, watches from a wall with one paw tucked like she's judging the whole thing. The procession begins, the bark is pushed gently into the water, and you help secure the trailing ropes on the banks. Drums sound. Flutes rise. The statue sways slightly as the current catches, and the priests declare that Ammonius is pleased. You follow along the shore, half walking, half floating with the crowd. You pass dancers in linen robes, acrobats twirling, and vendors selling honeyed dates you're not technically allowed to buy while on temple duty. But you're holding one for a friend, so it's fine. Along the way, people call out personal wishes, whisper prayers, and splash water onto their faces as the bark passes. One man bows so low he sneezes directly into a basket of figs. No one minds. The gods have a sense of humor. Surely. As the boat disappears toward Luxor, the crowd begins to disperse. You remain by the river, watching the last glimmer of gold vanish into the dusk, and you think about movement, the slow, ritual drift of a god across a river. The rhythm of stars rising. The pacing of constellations, the way the temple moves from task to task without ever feeling rushed. That night, you fall asleep with river wind still in your ears, and a single lotus petal tucked behind your ear, forgotten until it brushes your cheek in a dream. The morning after the Opet festival smells like trampled lotus petals, old honey, and very tired priests. You wake up with a stiff back from sleeping under the stars, an act that felt poetic until your spine reminded you it prefers flat surfaces. The cat is still there, curled neatly at your side like a loaf of divine judgment. Today, you've been assigned to assist in one of the temple's quieter but equally important tasks, helping the scribes record dreams. Yes, dreams. In ancient Egypt, dreams weren't just random firings of the brain, they were messages. Sometimes divine, sometimes ominous, and often just plain confusing. But always worth documenting. You make your way to the Hall of Quiet Minds, which is just as serene and dim as it sounds. Long, cool corridors. Walls covered with carved panels of dream hieroglyphs, eyes, serpents, staircases, broken jars. And somewhere in the distance, a fountain trickles just loudly enough to suggest mystical relevance. The lead dream scribe is a woman named Tayanet. She has ink-stained fingers, an unhurried way of speaking, and a memory sharp enough to recall what you dreamt 2 nights ago, despite you never telling her. You suspect sorcery. Or an extremely efficient gossip network. Sit here, she tells you, patting a cushion. You'll listen. Then write. Your first subject is a fisherman. He dreamt he was swallowed by a crocodile who then asked for parenting advice. Tayanet nods solemnly. Classic transformation dream, she murmurs, as if this sort of thing happens all the time. She dictates the dream in poetic phrasing while you copy. In the 7th hour of sleep, beneath the star of Sobek, the dreamer entered the mouth of knowing. It sounds impressive, though you're not sure what it means. Later comes a baker who dreamt of dough that wouldn't rise, except the dough spoke, saying it refused to rise until given a proper name. Tayanet takes this very seriously, possibly an omen for local grain prices. She mutters, historians still argue whether these dream records were purely symbolic, or if they doubled as ancient psychology sessions. Some think dreams were used to diagnose health, or suggest rituals. Others believe it was simply another way to feel close to the divine. Your personal theory? Egyptians just had really dramatic imaginations. You ask if all dreams are recorded. Tayanet shakes her head. Only those deemed unusual. She gives you a look. So probably not the one you had about the ibis riding a donkey. You blink. You definitely never mentioned that dream. She smiles faintly and continues sorting papyri. During a break, you help organize a series of clay tablets depicting common dream symbols. There are hundreds. A ladder equals advancement, a scorpion equals deceit, falling teeth equals betrayal, a crocodile playing a harp equals uncertain political news. You're not even sure that last one is metaphorical. One tablet catches your eye. It shows a figure sleeping beneath a canopy of stars, with a small winged creature hovering above. Tayanet notices. Ah, she says. The dream envoy. A spirit who delivers night messages. Sometimes friendly, sometimes mischievous. Likes figs. You file that away under important things to leave out before bed. In the afternoon, you're sent to the sanctuary for ritual sleep, a practice called incubation. Petitioners lie in a specially prepared room overnight, hoping for a divine dream response to their problems. You help prepare the room, fresh linen mats, a light coating of sacred oils, and bowls of calming herbs. One chamber has faint star patterns painted on the ceiling to encourage celestial guidance. Another includes a carved wooden cow meant to evoke Hathor's protection. It is unexpectedly cute. You're asked to keep watch during one session, which mostly involves listening to people snore while the cat wanders in, curls on someone's feet, and becomes part of the ritual whether anyone likes it or not. That evening, someone dreams they're flying over a field of golden reeds, chased by a talking jackal who keeps asking for directions. The person wakes crying, convinced it means they must change professions. Tayanet nods. Sounds about right. You're beginning to see how powerful dreams can be. Not because they predict the future, necessarily, but because they offer a mirror. A place to ask questions in symbols, and sometimes, if you're lucky, receive a blurry answer in return. At the end of the day, you help store the day's entries in the dream chamber, where hundreds of scrolls are organized not by name, but by imagery, wings, labyrinths, saltwater visions, and unexpected fruit. You place your scroll under talking animals. As you walk back to your quarters, the breeze is cool and smells of sage. Overhead, the stars wink like they know something. You wonder what they'll send your way tonight, and whether the ibis will ever forgive you. By now, you've settled into a rhythm at the temple, a strange but soothing one, like sandals tapping against stone in time with celestial music only the gods can hear. Today, your assignment is more physical, helping with a construction crew repairing one of the older temple colonnades. The columns are massive, carved with scenes of gods smiting chaos and kings receiving angst like complimentary breath mints. You've admired them in passing before, but now you'll be up close, possibly too close, the crew greets you with amused skepticism. Most of them are broad-shouldered men with sunburnished skin and the kind of upper arm muscles that make sandstone look soft. You, meanwhile, arrive with a satchel full of reed brushes and a loaf of date bread. It's clear who's doing the lifting. The lead builder is named Meanies. He's got a beard like tangled rope and a surprisingly gentle voice. "Don't worry," he says. "We don't let novices carry anything heavier than a prophecy." You're handed a wooden mallet and shown how to tap out old mortar without cracking the surrounding stone. The technique requires patience, rhythm, and the ability to not panic when a lizard scampers out of the crevice you just touched. You pass, barely, while you work. Meanies tells you the history of the colonnade. Built under Hatshepsut, expanded by Thutmose, patched by nearly everyone since. It's like a family recipe. Every generation adds spice and forgets the original measurements. You admire the craftsmanship. Each pillar tells a story in raised relief, processions, offerings, celestial maps. You wonder how long it took, how many hands carved those divine eyelashes, how many backs ached doing exactly what you're doing now. Mid-morning, a scribe arrives with a scaled model of the original colonnade, offering suggestions on proportions. The builders mostly ignore him. Scribes think everything's a symbol, one mutters. We think about gravity. Still, the collaboration works, mostly. You assist in hoisting a small capstone using a pulley system that seems both ingeniously simple and utterly terrifying. The ropes creak, sand sifts down from above, and a passing monkey throws a fig at your head. You take it as encouragement. One builder shows you an old technique for moving blocks by placing them on logs and rolling them forward. He says the trick is keeping the logs evenly spaced, but the real secret is yelling convincingly so everyone thinks you're in charge. Historians still argue how exactly the Egyptians moved their heaviest stones. Theories range from sand-lubricated sleds to armies of workers singing in sync to inspire coordinated movement. Today, you use the 3 people and a lot of grunting method. Effective, if inelegant. During lunch, the crew shares roasted onions and fish wrapped in palm leaves. One worker tells a joke about a pharaoh, a donkey, and a confused sun god. You don't entirely get it, but everyone laughs, so you do too. Later, you're given the more delicate job of repainting a chipped cartouche. The name it encircles belongs to a long-forgotten prince, one of the many sons of Ramses who ruled nothing but managed to commission everything. You steady your hand and apply fresh ochre, wondering whether that prince ever imagined some sleepy apprentice would one day refresh his name with donkey hair brushes. By late afternoon, a dust storm rolls in from the west. The sky goes soft beige, the wind stings like tiny needles, and the builders cover the statues with linen veils, like they're putting the gods to bed. You huddle in a half-built alcove with the crew, passing around a jug of warm beer. It tastes like barley and sunlight filtered through clay. The conversation drifts from architecture to astronomy to someone's deeply held belief that crocodiles can climb trees. No one has evidence, but everyone agrees to walk under palms a little faster now. When the storm dies down, the air smells new. Wet dust. Grounded magic. You resume work briefly, then help sweep the floor clean, one long final gesture to close the day. Before you leave, Meanies shows you a tiny scar on one of the oldest pillars. It's from a worker who dropped his chisel over 200 years ago, he says. They debated fixing it. In the end, they left it. A reminder that humans made this. You run your fingers over it. It's barely noticeable, but now you'll always see it. Walking back to your quarters, you feel different. Not just dusty and sore, though certainly both. But like you've joined something. A lineage of effort. A quiet choir of hands who shaped stone, not for themselves, but for the gods. Or maybe for people like you, those who'd one day walk by and wonder. That night, you dream of a pillar that hums when touched and whispers forgotten names if you lean in close enough. You wake up smiling. The cat is perched on your chest. She's definitely judging you again. The morning sun glints off the Nile like melted gold, and for once, the cat does not wake you by stepping directly on your sternum. Small victories. Today, you're assigned to something a little more scholarly, helping the temple archivist update the register of offerings. It's less glamorous than dream interpretation or stone carving, but in ancient Egypt, a carefully recorded basket of onions could mean the difference between cosmic order and divine sulking. The temple archives are deep, cool, and surprisingly quiet, except for the occasional sneeze from all the dust. You're introduced to Nebu, the head archivist, who is roughly 90% linen robes, 10% papyrus fibers, and somehow still faster at writing than you are at blinking. He shows you how the records are kept. Each offering, be it grain, perfume, meat, incense, or beer, is logged by type, quantity, date, and divine recipient. The system is precise, and like all things in Egypt, full of symbolism. For instance, a goose isn't just a goose, it's a nod to Geb, the earth god. A honey cake? An edible hymn to Hathor. You begin helping with a backlog from the latest festival. The lists go on forever. 3 jars of myrrh from the priest of Ptah. 4 baskets of lentils from the fisherman's guild. 1 loaf shaped like a jackal from a child named Palmy. You pause at that last one. Nebu peers over and smiles faintly. That's a very good jackal loaf. We kept it for display. It went stale in a holy way. As the day unfolds, you begin to realize the sheer complexity of ancient temple economics. The offerings aren't just spiritual, they're logistical. Items come in as tribute, payment, or thanks, and many get redistributed: meat to priests, grain to temple workers, linen to embalmers. The gods eat first, of course, but their portion is symbolic. Real humans enjoy the leftovers. Historians still argue whether the gods were seen as literal consumers of offerings or as cosmic patrons who absorbed their essence. Either way, the temple kitchen is always busy. In the storage rooms, you help sort goods for distribution. You count onions, endless, measure oil, slippery, and try not to sneeze into the frankincense stash. One chamber is devoted entirely to salt, a substance so valuable it's occasionally used as currency. You resist the urge to lick it. Barely. Your favorite room, however, is the offering preparation hall. Here, temple bakers create elaborate breads shaped like animals, flowers, and even tiny pyramids. The smell is divine: warm grain, honey, and sesame. One baker hands you a jackal loaf of your own, smiling as if it's a compliment. You name it, Mr. Sniffs, and carry it around all day like a sacred pet. Midday brings a small ceremony in the inner sanctum. The high priest enters with an armful of offerings: lotus flowers, incense cones, a small mirror. You watch from the side as the ritual unfolds in hypnotic cadence, chants, gestures, and careful placing of gifts before the statue of Ammonius Ra. One priest fans the air with a palm frond. Another sprinkles scented water in 4 directions. A third adjusts a tiny diadem on the god's head. It's equal parts reverence and choreography. You catch yourself holding your breath. Not because you expect the statue to move, though, secretly, maybe, but because there's something deeply human about this ritual. A group of people doing their absolute best to say thank you to something bigger than themselves. To keep order, harmony, and divine mood swings in balance. After the ritual, you help record what was offered, where it came from, and any omens or oddities. Today, someone donated a carved duck with 6 legs. No one comments. You write, possibly symbolic. Or a very ambitious carver. Later, Nebu invites you to help seal a papyrus scroll. He melts a tiny dab of wax, presses a carved seal into it, and hands it to you. Offerings may be perishable, he says. But records are eternal. Until mice. As the day winds down, you help carry excess supplies back to their storerooms. You pass baskets of coriander, bolts of patterned linen, jars painted with protective eyes. One jar is marked with a note: "Do not open," contains divine silence. You choose not to test it. On your way out, you spot Mr. Sniff sitting on a shelf among other bred animals. He looks content. Slightly moldy, but content. That night, as the stars emerge and the temple quiets, you realize something odd. The more mundane the task, counting onions, stacking scrolls, the more you feel part of something vast and meaningful, because every onion tallied, every scroll sealed, every jackal-shaped loaf, is a thread in the great cosmic tapestry, and you, apparently, are the sleepy-eyed apprentice holding it all together with ink-stained fingers. Your dreams last night were oddly bureaucratic, papyrus scrolls chasing you down corridors, bread loaves demanding to be alphabetized by flower type. So naturally, today's assignment is administrative. Again. You're back with Nebu, the head archivist, though this time he's less focused on offerings and more worried about a misfiled census scroll. We had 37 goats listed in this precinct, he mutters, rifling through brittle stacks. Now there are 39. Either someone gained goats, or we've gained mistakes. You offer to help sort through the precinct records, and soon you're knee-deep in population lists, tax rolls, and what appears to be an invoice for ceremonial wigs. You're beginning to see that ancient Egypt ran not only on grain and incense, but also on paperwork. One scroll lists a dozen residents of a village called Perhapi, including their professions: reed cutter, brewer, net maker, sandal repairman. You pause at the last name. Petasiris, professional sleeper. Nebu shrugs. Dream interpreter. Very unionized. As the morning light filters through the clearstory windows, you realize something odd: the scribes have their own scent. A mix of old papyrus, ink, and something vaguely herbal, possibly from chewing mint stalks to stay alert. Nebu offers you one, and it tastes like toothpaste made by a druid. Your job for the next few hours is to help create a new property map. You learn how land is measured in units called sedots, and how boundary markers are shaped like little obelisks. One of the temple surveyors explains that, in floods, boundaries often disappear, so maps serve both legal and spiritual purposes. Disputes between farmers are annoying, he says. Disputes between gods? Worse. Historians still argue how precise these ancient land surveys were, but there's no question the Egyptians took them seriously. Some disputes were settled by priests using ritual divination. Others were resolved with witness testimonies, or in one case, by releasing a cat and seeing which side of a field it chose to nap on. Justice was flexible. You learned to read the shorthand notation scribes used to save space. A coiled rope means census completed. A half circle with 3 lines needs verification. A tiny fish drawn upside down. Nebu whispers, someone was very annoyed. That's the ancient equivalent of a strongly worded letter. Midday brings a delivery of new scrolls from a town called Shedet. The courier is a young scribe named Penti, who arrives out of breath and covered in donkey hair. The beast refused to carry me, he says. So I carried the beast's attitude. You help catalog the new scrolls. Among them is a curious document, a list of pet names submitted for official divine blessings. You read aloud: Golden Sniffer, Princess Tailwag, Lord Meowsis. Nebu chuckles. People take God seriously. Pets even more so. One scroll catches your eye, a request from a farmer asking the temple to curse the mice in his granary. He's attached a tiny sketch of what he believes is the ringleader. It looks smug. After a long afternoon of ink and sneezing, you step outside for fresh air and spot an odd scene near the temple gate. A group of scribes are holding what appears to be a competition, speed writing spells while blindfolded. It's equal parts impressive and illegible. One scroll reads, "May the god Ra protect your elbows." Back inside, Nebu lets you take a turn at copying a fragment of the Instructions of Tahotep, a classic work of Egyptian wisdom. You squint at the elegant script, trying to keep your lines straight. It's not easy. Your hieratic resembles a duck trying to dance in sandals. Still, Nebu gives an approving nod. Could be worse. Could look like my apprentices. Toward evening, a priest drops in to request a record of all lunar feasts from the last decade. Apparently, the moon's phases are out of sync with someone's dream schedule. You help gather the records and realize how meticulous the temple calendar is, interweaving celestial movements with earthly bureaucracy. Historians still debate whether Egyptian calendars were based more on the lunar cycle or agricultural seasons. In truth, they probably used both, layered like baklava. Sweet, confusing baklava. By the time the oil lamps are lit, you're gently humming to yourself, hands stained with ink, eyes slightly crossed. Nebu pats your shoulder and says, "You've done good work." The gods notice order, especially in the margins. Walking home, you pass by a public notice board carved into limestone. Someone has etched a message: lost, 1 sandal, possibly stolen by ibis. Reward, 3 figs. You're too tired to laugh, but you smile anyway. That night, you sleep deeply. In your dream, you are a scribe, but the scrolls whisper their contents directly to you. One of them claims to be your long-lost cousin. Another turns into Mr. Sniffs. You wake up with papyrus fibers in your hair and a very specific craving for mint. Your legs ache in a way that suggests today will not be another day of quiet scribing, and you're right. The moment you enter the temple courtyard, a priest in a headdress made of reed bundles waves you over and hands you a woven pack. "Time to visit the farms," he says cheerfully. "The fields won't bless themselves." You glance at the pack's contents: a small figurine of Osiris, several lengths of linen ribbon, a sealed amphora of barley beer, and a disturbingly realistic ceramic frog. Right. Blessing Kit, you join a small group already preparing to head out: 2 junior priests, a field surveyor with a crooked walking stick, and a cart driver whose ox has a floral wreath between its horns. The animal looks less than thrilled, but trudges forward with the weary resignation of someone who knows this is going to take all day. Your destination: a cluster of temple-owned farms just beyond the riverbank. These fields supply a large portion of the grain for temple festivals, priestly salaries, and the occasional elaborate bread offering shaped like a hippo. It's a big deal. Along the way, the surveyor explains how land allocations are tied to both practicality and myth. Osiris, as god of agriculture and the underworld, is deeply involved in farming rituals. "Every time we plant," he says, "we reenact his death and rebirth. And every time someone forgets to weed properly, we offend his nose." The journey is slow but scenic. The Nile sparkles beside you, and the air is filled with dragonflies and the soft cluck of waterfowl. Occasionally you pass farmers driving herds of ducks between irrigation channels, a scene that feels oddly modern, like very enthusiastic poultry traffic. Your first stop is a wheat field mid-harvest. Golden stalks rustle like dry whispers, and the workers pause as your party arrives. The lead priest begins the ritual by placing the Osiris figurine on a small mound of earth and pouring a libation of beer over it. The soil soaks it up gratefully. You're handed the linen ribbons and told to tie them to the central sheaf, a symbolic gesture of divine unity. It goes well until a small goat decides the ribbons are edible. You attempt to shoo it off gently. It attempts to eat your sandal. After the ritual, you walk the field edges, checking irrigation ditches and boundary stones. Everything is tidy, except for one stone that's been knocked over and replaced with what is clearly an upside-down basket. The surveyor scowls. "We'll fix that before the next audit." No more basket gods. Historians still argue whether these agricultural rituals were more religious or regulatory. Most agree it was both. Farmers needed divine favor, yes, but they also needed to prove to temple officials that they were tending the land properly. Religion: meet red tape. At the second farm, you help inspect a plot growing onions and leeks. The smell is strong enough to qualify as a protective spell in itself. The priest performs a shorter ritual here, involving a chant and the lighting of 2 incense cones made of pressed herbs and cow dung. The gods, he explains, aren't picky about perfume. A young farmer approaches with a gift: 2 fresh cucumbers and a tiny clay amulet shaped like a fish. "For the temple," he says shyly. "Or you, if they're full." You pocket the amulet and tell him the gods will be especially pleased. You may or may not be lying. You break for lunch near a lotus pond, eating flatbread and figs beneath a sycamore tree while watching dragonflies skim the surface. One priest tries to nap on a rock and ends up with reed impressions on his cheek. Another carves his name into the bark of a tree and adds, "Was here, smelled bad." You suspect he's left similar graffiti in most districts. By afternoon, the sun is heavy and slow. You visit 2 more fields, one growing flax, the other producing chickpeas. The flax field is your favorite. Delicate blue blossoms sway gently in the breeze, and you almost forget that your tunic is sticking to your back. The chickpea plot, however, is chaotic. A herd of cows has trampled part of the field, and the farmer insists the cows are haunted. They moo at night. But backwards. The priest mutters a protection charm involving nut oil and loudly claps his hands 3 times. The cows blink but do not seem less possessed. You end the day at a granary, where scribes weigh and record harvested grain. You help lift sacks and try not to sneeze as the air fills with chaff. A small boy hands you a loaf of bread shaped like a pyramid and says, "For energy." It tastes mostly of dust and divine obligation. As the sun dips toward the horizon, you help pack up the blessing kit, ceramic frog, Osiris doll, and all, and climb back onto the cart. The ox sighs deeply as if to say, "Same time tomorrow, huh?" On the way back, one of the junior priests hums a tune you don't recognize. You join in, quietly, feeling the rhythm of the road, the warmth of the setting sun, and the deep contentment of having blessed something, even if it was just a goat-chewed sheaf of wheat. That night, back at your quarters, you set the tiny fish amulet by your sleeping mat and whisper a thanks to Osiris for not letting the goat eat your foot. You wake to the distant rhythm of drums. Not war drums, more like a gentle, percussive reminder that today is a festival day. A good thing, too, because your shoulders are still sore from chasing haunted cows through chickpea fields. As you emerge into the morning sun, the temple precinct is already buzzing. Bright linens hang from pylons, the air smells faintly of lotus and roasted duck, and someone has clearly gone overboard with blue pigment. Your usual work is on pause. Today, you are a helper in one of the grandest local events, the Festival of Hathor. The goddess Hathor, mistress of joy, music, and the occasional divine cow metaphor, is especially popular among dancers, women, and anyone who likes parties. Which is to say, everyone. Today's theme? Renewal, fertility, and sanctioned dancing until your knees give out. You're given a garland of fresh flowers to wear, a simple linen sash with tiny cow bells, no symbolism lost there, and an assignment to assist the temple musicians. Specifically, you're to help refill their wine cups and carry extra sistra, the jingly handheld instruments sacred to Hathor. It is not lost on you that this is ancient Egypt's version of a roadie gig. The music begins with slow flute melodies, layered with soft hand claps and the rhythmic rustling of beaded collars swaying as the dancers warm up. You settle beside the percussionists and immediately realize that at least 2 of them are very tipsy already. One leans in and stage whispers, "If Hathor wanted us sober, she'd have invented water first." Historians still debate how much of these temple festivals were true religious rites versus state-sanctioned raves. Most likely, it was both. Sacred joy wasn't seen as frivolous but essential. After all, what's the point of cosmic order if you never get to wiggle? Your job proves harder than expected, those sistra are heavier than they look, and the musicians keep misplacing them in bushes, food trays, or under their own robes. You retrieve one from inside a loaf of bread. Don't ask. Nearby, a procession begins. A statue of Hathor, veiled in gold cloth, is carried by 4 priests swaying in rhythm as temple women chant and toss petals. The air smells thickly sweet. You pause to watch as the statue passes under an archway of woven reeds, symbolizing her arrival, through the marshes of time, or possibly, through last-minute floral arrangements. Depends on your priest. Your next task. Helping with the boat of joy, a ritual bark set afloat in the sacred pool at the center of the courtyard. It's carved from cedar, painted red and turquoise, and adorned with tiny gold cows and moon symbols. You're assigned to sprinkle rose petals as it's launched. This goes well until a flock of ibises decides the petals are snacks. They wade in, uninvited but clearly convinced they're guests of honor. You shoo them away gently. One hisses and fluffs up like a very judgmental pillow. Midway through the day, the dancing reaches a fever pitch. Women in long fringed dresses swirl in tight circles, casting flower seeds into the air, which flutter like confetti. A small girl takes your hand and leads you into the ring. You're too stunned to decline, and before long you're swaying awkwardly among a sea of graceful bodies, trying not to trip over your own sandals, and yet, something shifts. The rhythm takes over, and your movements begin to feel less awkward. You forget the sore shoulders. You forget the goat from 2 days ago. You just move. Point one dancer, a woman with gray-streaked hair and the calm eyes of someone who's seen many such festivals, leans toward you and says, "Hather dances through you. Also, your sash is backward." She fixes it with a smile. As the sun reaches its peak, wine flows freely. You're offered a cup, which you accept with the cautious enthusiasm of someone who remembers what happened last time you drank temple beer too fast. This wine, however, is mixed with date syrup and water, sweet, smooth, and almost dangerously refreshing. You find a shaded spot to sit. The children are now enacting a miniature play about Hather's journey from Nubia to Egypt, complete with papier-mâché crocodiles and a clay lion that keeps falling over. One of the boys shouts, "She brought joy and milk," which earns a round of applause from the elders. Historians still argue about the deeper meaning of Hather's journey stories. Was she being lured back to balance cosmic order, or was it an allegory for the flooding Nile? Or maybe, just maybe, it was a parable about taking a vacation when people get too serious. You're asked to help prepare the final offering, an elaborate tray of honey cakes, pomegranates, beer, and dried fish. You place them before Hather's statue with quiet reverence. Someone adds a painted ostrich feather. Another places a mirror. Joy is not just about laughter, it's about reflection, too. The festival winds down with a slow, melodic chant that feels like a lullaby for the entire city. People recline against palm trunks, some dozing, others humming softly. The statue of Hather will remain veiled for one more day before being returned to the sanctuary. As you stand up to leave, someone presses a small token into your hand, a polished bead shaped like a tiny cow's head. To remember joy, they say. You tuck it into your sash. That night, your dreams are strange and floaty. You dance with ibises. You drink date wine on a moonbeam. You wake with the faintest jingle from your cowbell sash, and you smile, knowing somewhere in the divine chaos, Hather is probably still dancing. You wake up later than usual, the afterglow of Hather's festival still humming in your bones. Outside, the air feels quieter, cooler somehow, as if the entire city is exhaling. Today is a recovery day, which in temple life translates to one thing: inventory. Your supervisor, a lean man with impeccable handwriting and the permanent expression of someone who has lost too many reed pens, assigns you to the storerooms. We must account for all items blessed, borrowed, or mysteriously sticky, he says, handing you a wax tablet. Try not to lose anything, including your patience. The storerooms are tucked behind the temple's main hall, shaded and surprisingly cool. Inside, rows of shelves hold everything from embroidered linens to ritual oils to oddly specific objects like falcon feather fans and crocodile-shaped combs. You begin with the linen stacks, counting each folded square and jotting notes on texture, size, and, in one case, suspicious grape stains. As you work, you think about how temples weren't just religious centers, they were warehouses, banks, and logistical hubs. Goods flowed in and out constantly, offerings, festival supplies, even items left behind by pilgrims hoping to curry divine favor. Historians still debate how much of this was spiritual devotion versus clever community organizing. Probably both. Your favorite discovery today is a basket labeled, in careful hieratic script, assorted wigs, ceremonial. Inside, 6 neatly braided hairpieces, one with gold thread woven through. Another smells faintly of frankincense and regret. You try one on just for fun, it itches terribly and makes you look like a noblewoman who's seen better days. Next you move on to the temple oils. Each jar is labeled with the name of a deity, the intended use, anointing, purification, fragrance, snake repellent, and a symbol you assume means, flammable, do not sniff. You lift each carefully, noting the weight, cloudiness, and if the lid seems properly sealed. One is missing entirely. You make a note, possible theft or divine consumption. You're joined by another scribe, a young man with ink-stained fingers and a suspiciously large snack pouch. I always get stuck with the perfumed animal fats, he grumbles, opening a crate that smells like lavender and goat. You nod sympathetically and hand him the extra stylus you brought, earning a grateful look and a shared fig.I in the back corner. You come to the miscellaneous offerings shelf. This is where things get weird. There's a collection of carved beetles, some beautiful, others clearly made by enthusiastic children. A stack of folded notes on papyrus, prayers, wishes, and one love letter to an unnamed scribe. You raise an eyebrow. There's also a small doll made of linen and mud, labeled only, left by traveler, not cursed, probably. One shelf holds food offerings, preserved in beeswax, miniature loaves of bread, fruits, dried fish, and one questionable fig that appears to be more wax than fruit now. A tag beneath it reads, "Do not eat, again." You take a break beside a window slit, watching the temple courtyard below. A few priests are sweeping up petals from the festival, while an acolyte tries to teach a goat not to eat the incense cones. You sip some barley water and reflect that, for all the grandeur of temples, it's the small things that keep everything running: pens, sandals, quiet checklists, and the hope that nobody swapped the myrrh for fish oil again. Back to work. The amulets cupboard is a treasure trove: tiny gods in lapis, faience eyes, heart-shaped charms, protective scarabs. One drawer contains only cat-shaped pendants. Another, labeled "returned by mistake," holds a single pendant shaped like a loaf of bread. You wonder who was disappointed to get that instead of a sun disk. You pause at the shelf of ritual tools, sistra, incense burners, libation spoons shaped like gazelles. Each item carries the weight of ceremony, but also the fingerprints of real people who've used them over and over. The bronze mirror has a smudge where someone likely checked their hair mid-ritual. The incense bowl has a crack glued with what looks like hardened honey. Divine tools, yes, but also very human. Historians often focus on grand rituals, colossal statues, epic hymns. But here, in the storerooms, the quieter truth reveals itself. This religion ran on order, repetition, and endless lists. Sacred, yes, but also profoundly domestic. It was as much about sweeping ash out of a burner as it was calling to the gods. Just as you're wrapping up, you notice one final item, a bundle wrapped in faded linen, tucked behind a jar. Inside is a collection of reed pens, broken or chewed at the tips. A small tag reads, "For Thoth." You smile. Of course the scribes have their own offering stash. You slip one of your older pens in as well. Consider it an offering of ink and endurance. Before you leave, you glance over your wax tablet. It's filled with tiny notations, sketches of broken jars, and a few doodles of ibis birds in hats. You got bored. You hand it to the supervisor, who scans it, nods approvingly, and mutters, "Not bad. Next time, feather audits." That night, your dreams are quiet. You walk through aisles of amulets that glow softly. The gods are silent but watching. You tuck your reed pen into a crack in the wall and whisper, "See you tomorrow." You wake before dawn this time, stirred not by the usual temple bells or goat-related commotion, but by a messenger tapping at the edge of your doorway with a sense of theatrical urgency. He's young, overly excited, and clutching a scroll like it's made of solid gold. "Congratulations," he grins, slightly out of breath. "You've been selected for a tomb assignment." You blink at him. "Is that good?" He shrugs. "It's not bad," he says. "Just bring snacks." The tomb in question belongs to a mid-ranking official named Nebrahotep, recently passed and reportedly very fond of figs, pigeons, and having things done exactly to specification. His family has funded a set of final inscriptions and decorative updates before the burial rites commence. Your job? Assist the artisans, double-check hieroglyphic spelling, and try not to offend any ghosts. You pack lightly: stylus, ink, measuring cord, a half-loaf of honey bread, and a token from the Festival of Hathor for luck. You also bring your field sandals, which are uglier but far sturdier than your usual pair. The tomb is located along a hillside necropolis just outside the city, a dry, sun-baked slope scattered with shrines, prayer stelae, and the occasional goat who has no respect for the dead. You're greeted at the tomb entrance by the lead artisan, a woman named Intefret, who's chewing on what appears to be a reed and has paint stains up to her elbows. Try not to breathe too hard inside, she says, handing you a linen wrap for your nose and mouth. The walls are dry, but the dust isn't. Inside, the tomb is dim but richly decorated. The walls pulse with images, scenes of Nebrahotep's life, gods receiving offerings, boats sailing into the afterlife. You recognize the god Anubis weighing a heart beside the feather of Maat, and Ra sailing across the sky in his golden bark. There's even a small vignette of Nebrahotep holding a bouquet of lotuses with an almost smug expression. You join a trio of scribes already working on a side wall inscription. Your task: copy sections of the Book of the Dead scrolls into wall-friendly format, making sure none of the spells are abbreviated too much. One incorrect glyph and you could accidentally summon a snake-headed guardian with serious boundary issues. Historians still argue whether these spells were believed to literally work, or if they were symbolic reassurance, a kind of celestial passport. Most agree, if you could afford them, you'd want every line just in case. Your first section goes smoothly, until you notice a line that could be read either as Nebrahotep passes through the western gate or Nebrahotep passes gas in the western gate, depending on a slight curve in the reed stroke. You raise this diplomatically, Intefret sighs. Redo it. The last thing we need is a flatulent afterlife. As the sun rises higher, the heat inside the tomb becomes thick and pressing. The painters are fanning themselves with papyrus sheets. One apprentice tries to cool a bowl of pigment by blowing into it, which results in blue freckles across his face and a very patient lecture from Intefret about the dignity of turquoise. You take a break outside beneath a low stone overhang. The necropolis is quiet, save for the occasional clatter of pottery from another tomb crew and the lazy drone of bees near a wild fig tree. A small boy runs by with a basket of date cakes for the workers, and you buy two, giving him a copper ring in exchange. He gives you a wink and runs off before you can ask where he got the cakes. You return to your work with sticky fingers and renewed focus. There's something calming about tomb script. It's deliberate, even meditative. Every line must be straight, every symbol proportional. You find yourself sinking into the rhythm: bird, eye, hand, reed, bird, eye, hand, reed. One of the painters tells you a story while she mixes new ochre pigment. They say Nebrahotep had 3 wives, but none of them liked his favorite scribe. That's why the scribe is missing from all the tomb scenes. She winks. Petty even in death. By late afternoon, the shadows inside the tomb grow long. You help place tiny offering models, bakers, brewers, boatmen, on a shelf near the back chamber. These are meant to serve Nebrahotep in the next world. One of them drops its clay bread loaf as you set it down. You carefully glue it back with a dab of date syrup and whisper, "You'll get there, little guy." As you're leaving, Intefret hands you a small paint-stained cloth with your name written on it in her bold script. You did decent work. If I ever get my own tomb, I might let you spell my name right on the wall. You bow slightly, touched by the compliment. The sun is dipping low when you descend the necropolis slope. The city sparkles in the fading light, the Nile turning to burnished gold. You feel dusty, exhausted, but strangely satisfied. That night, your dreams flicker with hieroglyphs that shimmer and shift, words you can't quite read but somehow understand. In them, Nebrahotep nods solemnly at you from his painted wall, clutching his bouquet of lotuses, finally unbothered. The next morning, you arrive at the temple with a familiar heaviness in your step. Your feet still ache from yesterday's tomb visit, but there's an odd thrill that lingers. Maybe it's the idea that, for all their pomp and grandeur, these rituals, these lives, remain frozen in time, a moment that could be preserved in stone forever. Just like Nebrahotep's, you enter the scriptorium to find a new task awaiting you. The temple is holding its first public education session, and it's your job to help lead it. The session is about writing and reading for the common people, a concept that's as foreign as it is oddly exciting. You know your letters inside and out, every hieroglyph, every curve and line, but this is different. Teaching. Sharing. The room fills slowly, with a mixture of workers, traders, and even a couple of children holding out their small palms like open scrolls, eager to learn. You see a man sitting at the back, the rough skin of his hands betraying a life of hard labor, who, despite his age, looks incredibly determined. It strikes you that, perhaps for the first time, he's being given a chance to transcend his station. If only for a moment. You start by addressing the room, noting that while the scribes of the temple work with sacred texts, the ability to write isn't just for the priesthood, it's for everyone. After all, a letter to your family, a record of your trade, or even an order for a fresh batch of beer, all these things rely on words, on symbols. And the more you know, the more you can make sense of the world around you. Historians still debate when writing systems first emerged in ancient Egypt, some claiming it was a necessity driven by the need for accounting, others arguing that it was spiritual, because the gods themselves spoke in writing. Either way, you think, the point is clear: writing equals power. The first lesson is simple: the divine symbols. You begin by showing the basics: the ankh, the eye of Horus, the falcon. You explain how each shape carries meaning, how each image tells a story. A simple line, for example, can represent water. A ripple could mean a river, and if you turn it on its side, you have a horizon, just like the one in the sky at dawn, stretching endlessly ahead. A woman in the front raises her hand. Is there a symbol for love? You smile gently. There's no single symbol for it. But there are many symbols for its parts: heart, embrace, offerings. Each one speaks of a different aspect of love. The children giggle at the thought of writing love, as if it's something tangible, something they could carry around with them. They begin drawing hearts and circles, their faces focused. Next, you introduce the idea of counting, something that has fascinated you ever since your first scroll. Egyptian numbers aren't like the ones you learned as a child, they're images too, tied to the very world they inhabit. One stroke represents a unit, a single object. A coil of rope represents 10, because ropes were used to measure land. A lotus, opened wide, represents 100. And a finger, just a finger, is 10,000. You write them out on a fresh papyrus scroll, and the children laugh at the idea of writing a finger, a whole hand, and then a long line of fingers in order to count the wealth of cattle. But the man in the back nods thoughtfully, clearly making connections that only someone used to counting livestock or grain might understand. You'll use these numbers every day, you tell them. Whether it's for trading, for offerings, or for your daily needs. As the session goes on, it becomes clear that this lesson isn't just about teaching a skill, it's about empowering people. You're giving them the means to communicate, to record their lives, and in some cases, to write down their hopes and dreams. A man quietly writes his name on a scrap of papyrus for the first time, his eyes wide as he forms the symbols. His hands, which have known only hard labor, suddenly seem softer, lighter. The more the group works, the more animated they become, asking questions, comparing notes, and helping each other decipher the complicated system of images. For a moment, the distinction between the scribes and the people blurs. You're all just creators of words now. The heat of the day presses down upon you, but there's an odd comfort in the motion of the class, in the steady flow of ink, and in the simple act of teaching something so fundamental. You realize that writing is, in many ways, a sacred act, a divine form of communication between the living and the gods. And by passing it on, you are participating in something larger than yourself, connecting people to the words that have shaped history. By the time the sun starts to set and the class begins to thin out, you feel a sense of accomplishment. You've managed to help people unlock a door that was once closed to them. Perhaps you've even altered their lives in small but profound ways. As the last students leave, you gather the scrolls and tidy up the room, noticing how many pieces of parchment are filled with bold, curious strokes. Even in their awkwardness, these characters are something new, something alive. Perhaps you'll even get to write your name in the margins of someone else's scroll someday. The next few weeks pass in a blur of temple duties, but you hold on to that small success. Each time you encounter a scribal assistant, you see them carrying small scrolls, practicing their new skills. Every now and then, a piece of parchment is slipped into your hand by someone you helped, a silent thanks. That night, your dreams are filled with papyrus, quills, and ink. You are writing a letter, one that contains no beginning, no end, but only the sacredness of every stroke. Another day breaks, and once again, you're on your way to the temple, your sandals clapping softly against the worn stone streets. The sun is barely visible, casting a soft, amber glow over the horizon as you pass the marketplace. The air smells faintly of incense, fresh bread, and the ever-present dust of the city. The familiar bustle surrounds you, traders calling out prices, children chasing each other with carefree shrieks, and the clinking of pots being packed for the day's rituals. Today, however, the temple feels different. There's a quiet anticipation in the air, a sense of purpose. As you enter the courtyard, you spot the high priest standing at the temple's entrance, his hands clasped in a gesture of solemn welcome. His robes shimmer with gold thread, and his eyes gleam with a peculiar sort of intensity. "You've been chosen," he says to you, his voice a soft rumble that seems to echo across the sacred space. There is a task that requires a steady hand and a sharp mind. Before you can ask for clarification, he beckons you into the inner sanctum of the temple, where the walls glow with a golden light and incense wafts in the air, thick and heady. The high priest gestures toward a small altar, where a pristine, unopened scroll lies resting. You can almost hear it calling to you, as if the ink inside the scroll holds secrets meant just for your eyes. This, he continues, is a rare and delicate matter. The pharaoh has requested a new set of royal decrees, written and sealed. But it is no simple task. These decrees are for the gods themselves. Your heart skips a beat. Writing something meant for the gods? That's as high as it gets. The high priest takes a deep breath. You are to assist in transcribing these divine words, which will then be sealed and presented in a ceremony before the entire kingdom. It is a great honor, but also a great responsibility. You nod, trying to steady your breath, and move closer to the scroll. It's long, its edges beautifully adorned with delicate illustrations of gods and sacred animals. You can't help but feel a surge of awe. It's not every day you're tasked with writing for the pharaoh, let alone for the gods. Be mindful of every stroke, the high priest advises. The gods are watching. Even the smallest mistake could have unintended consequences. His words linger in the air, heavy with meaning. You're not sure whether he's referring to the gods or something more earthly, but the weight of the task feels immense. You unfurl the scroll carefully, and it is as though the air itself shifts. The silence is palpable as you begin to work, your quill dancing across the papyrus, each stroke deliberate, measured. The words come to life beneath your hand, flowing with an elegant grace that seems to echo the rhythm of the Nile itself. As you write, you're acutely aware of the surroundings, each flicker of the temple's torches, the soft chanting from the priests in the outer chambers, the rhythmic pulse of the world beyond the temple walls. It's as if the entire universe is holding its breath, waiting for you to finish. You write about offerings, about the gods' needs, about the pharaoh's eternal rule and the peace of the land. The ink flows smoothly, and your hand moves with a quiet confidence. Historians still argue about the exact purpose of royal decrees. Were they simply ceremonial, or did they hold real power over the kingdom? Regardless, today they feel profoundly significant. This is not just ink on papyrus, it's the very fabric of divine order. As you approach the end of the first section, you notice a flicker of movement at the edge of your vision. It's a figure, draped in a long cloak, moving silently in the shadows. You don't acknowledge it, but a sense of unease creeps in. Is someone watching you? The thought passes quickly as you finish the final lines, sealing the first part of the decree with a flourish of your quill. The high priest watches you from across the room, his gaze piercing. He doesn't say anything immediately, but you sense his approval. "Very well," he finally murmurs. "Now, it is time for the ceremony." You are led to the main temple hall, where the other priests have gathered. The air is thick with incense, and the faintest hum of chanting vibrates through the stone. At the altar, the sacred scroll is placed on a pedestal. The priests form a circle around you, and the high priest steps forward, raising his arms to the gods. "May this decree bring prosperity, may it be heard by the gods, and may it be forever sealed in eternity," he intones. His voice reverberates off the walls, and you can't help but feel the weight of the moment. As he places the seal on the scroll, you stand in the circle, the world quiet around you. The ceremony feels eternal, as though you are connected to something far larger than yourself, something divine. You feel a strange calm wash over you, an unspoken reassurance that, in this moment, everything is as it should be. Later, as you leave the temple, you walk into the cool evening air, the weight of the scroll still in your mind. It's a small, subtle feeling, but there's a shift in you. You've been part of something sacred, something that stretches beyond the bounds of time. You feel as though you've touched the eternal, just for a brief moment. That night, as you drift off to sleep, your dreams are filled with whispers of ancient words and royal decrees. In the distance, you can hear the faint chanting of the priests, and for a moment, you almost think you can see the gods themselves, watching over the kingdom, their presence ever so near. The morning light filters gently through the high temple windows as you step into the cool stone halls once again. The events of yesterday's ceremony feel like a dream, a fleeting moment where you were not merely a scribe, but part of something much greater, much older. The scroll is gone now, sealed with the pharaoh's blessing, but the weight of the task lingers. Today, the high priest has summoned you for a new assignment, one that carries a different air, a sense of quiet urgency. You are to accompany him on a journey to the sacred city of Abydos, a place of pilgrimage for those who seek the favor of Osiris, the god of the afterlife. It's a journey filled with both reverence and mystery, and as you pack your scrolls, quills, and a small offering to the gods, you can't help but feel a flutter of nervousness. Abydos is not just a city, it's the very gateway to the underworld. As you set out, the sun casts long shadows over the Nile, turning the water into a shimmering expanse of gold. The boat glides smoothly over the river, its oars dipping silently into the water. The journey takes several days, and each day feels like a chapter of history unfolding before your eyes. You watch as the landscape shifts, from the fertile banks of the Nile to the barren desert beyond, a reminder of the harshness of the world. Historians still argue about the exact significance of Abydos. Some say it was a city dedicated solely to Osiris, while others claim it was also a place of royal burial. What's certain is that it was revered as the heart of Egypt's religious life, and the tombs of its pharaohs were believed to be entrances to the afterlife. On the fourth day of your journey, you arrive at Abydos. The city feels different from the others you've visited, a place where every stone, every wall seems imbued with ancient power. The air is thick with incense, and the sacred tombs and temples rise in the distance like ancient giants, their walls covered in detailed hieroglyphs that tell stories of life, death, and rebirth. The high priest leads you through the city, his pace steady and deliberate. His purpose here is clear: to perform rituals that will ensure the gods favor Egypt and maintain the order of the universe. You are to assist him, transcribing sacred texts and performing minor rites, your hands moving with the knowledge that what you write could influence the balance between life and death itself. As you enter the temple of Osiris, you can feel the weight of the past in the air, thick and oppressive. The walls are covered in vivid depictions of Osiris, his body wrapped in linen, his eyes closed in eternal rest. The scent of incense fills the room, and the flickering torchlight casts eerie shadows on the carvings. It's as though time has stood still here, as if the gods themselves have watched over this place for millennia. The high priest gestures for you to sit at the back of the temple. You will assist in recording the prayers, he says softly. But be cautious. In a place like this, the presence of the gods is palpable. You nod, your hands trembling slightly as you unfold your scroll. The task seems simple enough: record the prayers of the faithful, transcribe the sacred rituals, and ensure that nothing is forgotten. But as you begin, there's a strange sensation, like a hum that runs through your very bones. The air feels heavy with expectation, as if the gods themselves are waiting for you to write the perfect words. The first prayer you transcribe is for Osiris, asking for protection and favor in the afterlife. The words are simple, but profound. They speak of hope, of rebirth, and of the endless cycle of life and death. As you write, you can feel the weight of each stroke, as if each word you form is a bridge between this world and the next. Historians still argue whether the Egyptians truly believed that the afterlife could be accessed through writing, but here, in the heart of Abydos, it feels as though every word has the power to transcend. As the day wears on, you continue to write, the flickering torches casting their shadows over the ancient carvings on the walls. The high priest murmurs incantations as he prepares offerings for the gods, his voice low and rhythmic. Every now and then, a priest or priestess enters the temple, their faces serene as they offer their prayers to Osiris. Each person seems to carry an air of solemnity, as if they are all part of an ancient ritual that has been passed down for generations. At one point, the high priest beckons you closer, his voice barely a whisper. "There is a particular prayer I need you to transcribe," he says, his eyes glinting with something you can't quite place. "It is for a soul that has passed. A pharaoh, in fact. The words must be perfect. If they are not, well, let us say that the gods do not look kindly upon mistakes in a place like this." You feel a chill run down your spine as he hands you a small, worn scroll. The words are delicate, fragile, written in a script you recognize, but with a subtle difference. There's a cadence to this prayer that feels ancient, older than the pharaohs themselves. You carefully unroll the scroll, your fingers brushing against the fragile papyrus. The words you read are filled with reverence and mourning, a prayer for the soul's journey through the underworld. It is a prayer that seeks to guide the departed king through the trials of the afterlife, to ensure that he reaches the hall of judgment and stands before Osiris. As you write the words, you can feel the weight of the task. The gods seem closer now, their presence almost tangible. It's as though the very air in the temple is charged with their energy, their expectations. Historians still debate whether the Egyptians believed that the words written on these sacred scrolls could alter the course of one's journey into the afterlife, but here, in the shadow of the ancient tombs, you begin to wonder if perhaps there is more to this than mere superstition. When the prayer is complete, you pause for a moment, taking a deep breath. The silence in the temple is profound, broken only by the soft sounds of the high priest's prayers. You look up at the walls, at the figures of Osiris, at the faces of the departed kings, and for a fleeting moment, you feel as though you are part of something eternal. The evening settles in, and the temperature cools slightly as night creeps over the sacred city of Abydos. The soft chirping of insects and the distant calls of birds nestling into the trees are the only sounds you hear as you continue your work under the flickering candlelight. The scrolls you've transcribed lay scattered across the stone altar, each one a piece of the larger tapestry of Egypt's rich religious history, and you are deeply aware of your role in this timeless ritual. The high priest is still at work, moving around the temple with deliberate purpose, chanting softly to the gods, making offerings, and ensuring that each aspect of the ceremony is carried out precisely as dictated by the ancient texts. There is a sacredness in his every movement, an air of reverence that almost feels tangible, as if the very ground you stand on is imbued with divine significance. You are beginning to understand the weight of the task you've been given, and with that understanding comes a sense of deep respect, not only for the work, but for the people who have come before you. These ancient rituals have been performed for millennia, passed down from generation to generation. Each word written, each prayer spoken, carries with it the hopes and beliefs of countless souls who came before. The gods are listening, and the balance between life and death hinges on your ability to get everything just right. The next day, the high priest informs you that you will be accompanying him to one of the tombs, the tomb of Osiris himself. This particular tomb is said to hold great power, a connection to the afterlife that even the gods respect. It is a tomb shrouded in legend, one that has been the subject of much debate among scholars and priests for centuries. Many believe it is not simply a burial place but a portal, a threshold between the world of the living and the world of the dead. As you prepare for the journey to the tomb, the high priest speaks quietly, almost as though he's sharing a secret. This is not an ordinary tomb, he warns. You must be cautious. It is said that Osiris's power still lingers in the walls, and the spirits that reside within are restless. You swallow hard, feeling the weight of his words. Your heart races at the thought of what awaits you inside. Is it truly a gateway to the underworld? Or is it simply a myth, passed down over generations to stir the imagination? Either way, the mystery feels alive, and the anticipation builds as you step toward the entrance of the tomb. The air inside the tomb is thick with dust, the walls covered in faded hieroglyphs that tell the story of Osiris's journey into the afterlife. The further you move inside, the darker and quieter it becomes, the only sound the soft shuffle of your sandals on the stone floor. The high priest walks ahead, his steps confident and steady. He is no stranger to this place, but you feel a sense of reverence for every step taken. The tomb itself feels ancient, filled with secrets that have been hidden away for centuries. The deeper you go, the more the air shifts. It becomes heavy, dense with a kind of energy that you cannot quite explain. It feels as though the very walls are alive, watching you, judging you. You glance at the high priest, whose face remains calm, yet there is a glint in his eyes, an awareness of something you cannot fully comprehend. He stops in front of a massive stone slab. Its surface is covered in intricate carvings, the story of Osiris's death and resurrection playing out in painstaking detail. The high priest gestures for you to approach. "It is here," he says softly, his voice reverberating through the tomb, where Osiris is said to have crossed over into the afterlife. You step forward, feeling the stone cool beneath your fingertips. The carvings are so finely detailed, you almost expect them to come to life at any moment. They depict Osiris's final journey, his murder by Set, the god of chaos, and his resurrection by his wife, Isis. The tale is one of love, betrayal, death, and rebirth, themes that resonate deeply with the Egyptians and with those who still honor the gods today. Historians still debate the true meaning of Osiris's story. Some argue that it is a myth that explains the annual flooding of the Nile, symbolizing the death and rebirth of the land. Others believe it is a tale of resurrection and immortality, a promise that life does not end with death, but is transformed into something eternal. Whatever the interpretation, the impact of Osiris's story on Egyptian culture cannot be overstated. It is a cornerstone of their beliefs about the afterlife, the very thing that shapes how they live. And as you continue to examine the stone, the high priest begins to chant softly, his voice blending with the soft echo of the tomb. His words are ancient, and though you cannot understand them all, you feel the rhythm of the chant reverberating through your chest. It is as if the tomb itself responds to the incantation, the air growing warmer, the walls seeming to pulse with life. After a moment, he stops, turning to you with a solemn look. This is the heart of Egypt's belief in the afterlife. And you have been part of it. He smiles faintly, though the weight of the moment is clear in his expression. What you have written, what you have transcribed, is not simply words on a scroll. It is a link to the divine. It will guide the souls of the departed, and it will ensure that Osiris's power continues to protect Egypt for generations. You nod, feeling the significance of his words settle into your bones. As you look around the tomb, you realize that you are part of something much larger than yourself. You are not simply a scribe. You are a keeper of knowledge, a vessel through which the gods communicate with the living. The high priest turns to leave, and you follow him out of the tomb, your thoughts still swirling around the stories you've witnessed. The sun is low on the horizon, casting long shadows over the land as you make your way back to the temple. In the distance, the faintest sound of chanting rises into the air, a reminder that the rituals of the gods never cease. As you leave the shadow of the tomb and the heavy, sacred air of Abydos, the Nile's gentle current feels almost like a breath of fresh air. The quiet rhythm of the river brings a sense of calm after the intense atmosphere of the temple. But even as you board the boat to return to the main city, the experiences of the past few days linger in your mind, heavy like the scrolls you carry. The high priest's teachings have opened a door to a new understanding of the world, one where death and life are intertwined, where every prayer and ritual is a thread in the vast tapestry of eternity. The journey to Abydos, while filled with ancient sights and sounds, has left you with a deeper connection to Egypt's religious heart, the afterlife, and, perhaps most profoundly, the role you play in ensuring that these sacred traditions survive. As the boat glides across the calm waters, you find yourself reflecting on the people you've met here, the priests, the pilgrims, the commoners. There's an odd sense of unity between them all, a shared belief in the afterlife and the power of the gods. In Egypt, everyone is connected by this faith. And you, just a humble scribe, have become an integral part of it. You can almost feel the weight of responsibility pressing against your chest, not just to transcribe the sacred texts, but to preserve the very essence of Egypt's spiritual heritage. Historians still argue whether the role of scribes in ancient Egypt was merely administrative or if it carried deeper spiritual significance. Some believe that scribes were seen as mediators between the gods and humanity, while others suggest that they were simply skilled record keepers. But here, as you sit on the boat, you begin to understand that it is more than just a job. It is a vocation. A calling. The night settles in as you drift back toward the city. The moon reflects off the river, casting a soft glow across the water. The stars are sharp, clear, distant, and for a moment, you forget everything but the quiet, steady rhythm of the boat cutting through the water. The simple, peaceful motion lulls you into a kind of meditative state, the kind that allows your mind to wander, to sift through all that you've learned and experienced. You think about the tomb of Osiris. You think about the way the walls seem to pulse with energy, as if the god's presence had never truly left. You think about the high priest's words, about how the scrolls you transcribe will carry on the legacy of Egypt's beliefs. And as the boat moves further down the river, you think about the fact that you are now part of something far older than you could ever have imagined. Before you even realize it, you've arrived back at the city. The boat docks gently against the pier, and you step off, your legs stiff from the long journey. The streets of the city are bustling with activity once again, but you feel oddly detached from it all. The world of the living, with its noise and its haste, feels so distant from the sacred, solemn world you've just left behind. You walk to the temple, the soft sound of your sandals on the stone path the only thing you can focus on. As you enter the temple grounds, the high priest is already waiting for you, his face as serene and unreadable as always. The ritual is complete, he says, nodding in your direction. The prayers have been written, the offerings made, and the gods have been honored. You have done well, scribe. You nod, though you don't quite feel like it's over. The journey you've been on is more than just a series of tasks. It has been a journey of understanding, of connecting with something much larger than yourself. You realize that you're no longer just a scribe. You are now a part of the ancient cycle of life and death, of rebirth and resurrection, and your role in that cycle is as important as anyone else's. The high priest's approval feels good, but it is tempered by the knowledge that there is still more to do. The gods are not appeased with one offering or one prayer. No, their demands are eternal, and so is your work. There will be more scrolls to write, more rituals to record, more prayers to transcribe. But as you stand in the temple, watching the flickering flames of the torches dance on the walls, you understand that you are ready. You return to your quarters that night, the weight of the day's experiences sitting heavy in your mind. As you lay down on your mat, you feel a sense of peace that comes with knowing your purpose. The work you do here is essential, not just for the present, but for the future, for the souls of those who have passed and those who will pass. Egypt's history, its religion, its myths, its stories, depends on you and others like you to preserve it, to carry it forward through the ages. As you drift off to sleep, the images of Osiris, of the sacred tomb, and of the high priest's final words swirl through your mind. But eventually, they fade into the background, replaced by the soft sound of the Nile's flow, carrying you into a peaceful, timeless sleep. The sun rises gently the next morning, the light spilling through the curtains in soft beams, brushing across your face as if waking you from a deep, uninterrupted rest. You stir, still wrapped in the haze of sleep, but a sense of quiet anticipation rises within you. The events of the previous days have set something in motion, and you can feel it, even in the stillness of the early hours. Something has changed. You are no longer the same person who first stepped foot in Abydos. Your role here, in this grand cycle of life, death, and rebirth, feels clearer now. As you sit up and stretch, your eyes fall on the scrolls you have transcribed, neatly stacked beside your bed. Each one is a reminder of your task, your purpose, and the weight of your responsibility. You glance at the window again, where the Nile flows in the distance, its surface glistening in the first light of day. For a moment, you wonder if those who have passed before you, those whose names are etched in the annals of Egypt's history, are now resting in the afterlife, continuing their journeys with Osiris. The thought is strangely comforting, as though the gods truly are looking after their people, guiding them through the eternal cycle. But this morning, as you prepare for another day of work in the temple, there is an unfamiliar sense of urgency in the air. The high priest has summoned you to the inner sanctum, a place you've only been to on rare occasions. It is a space where the most sacred rituals are performed, where the gods are believed to draw closest to the living, and where only the most trusted and devoted servants are allowed to enter. You make your way through the winding corridors of the temple, each step bringing you closer to the heart of the sacred space. The walls are adorned with intricate carvings, each one telling a story that is both familiar and foreign. The flickering light of the torches casts long shadows, making the temple feel even more ancient, more timeless, as if it exists outside of the normal flow of time. When you reach the inner sanctum, the high priest is waiting for you. His expression is as calm as ever, but there is something different in his eyes today. Something that suggests he knows more than he is letting on. "You've done well," he says, as you step into the room. But the work is far from over. There is still much to be done. His words hang in the air, heavy with meaning. You feel a sense of unease, though you cannot place why. Perhaps it is the sense that the work you've been doing has only been a small part of a much larger, much more important task. You are here to preserve the stories of the gods, yes, but perhaps there is something more to your role that you have yet to understand. The high priest gestures for you to approach a stone table at the center of the room. On it, a new scroll lies, freshly written, its contents unfamiliar to you. The high priest picks it up carefully, as though it holds some sort of hidden power. He unrolls it, revealing the delicate hieroglyphs etched onto the parchment. "This," he says softly, "is the final offering. The last step in securing Osiris's favor." You lean in closer to examine the scroll, your eyes scanning the symbols. It is a prayer, a complex and deeply sacred invocation that speaks directly to Osiris, asking for protection, guidance, and immortality. But as you read further, you notice something unusual. There is a part of the prayer that feels wrong. The words seem to carry a weight that doesn't belong, a sense of darkness that doesn't fit with the rest of the prayer's hopeful tone. Historians still argue whether the Egyptians ever practiced darker forms of magic in their religious rites. Some suggest that the priests occasionally invoked forbidden forces to protect the dead or to gain the favor of the gods, while others believe these practices were strictly ceremonial, never meant to be taken literally. But you cannot deny the uneasy feeling that stirs in your chest as you read the words on the scroll. The high priest seems to sense your hesitation. "You are not the first to feel this way," he says quietly. "But the gods are not always gentle. Sometimes, we must ask for favors in ways that are uncomfortable." You stare at him, unsure of how to respond. The thought of invoking darker powers, of dealing with forces beyond your comprehension, fills you with dread. You've always believed in the gods, trusted in their wisdom and protection. But this feels different. It feels dangerous. "The time has come to test our faith," the high priest continues. "You must be the one to transcribe this final prayer. Only then can we ensure the protection of the people, the safety of Egypt itself." A heavy silence falls over the room, the weight of his words pressing down on you. You realize that this is the true purpose of your work, the task that will define your role in Egypt's history. This is not just about preserving knowledge. It is about using that knowledge to protect those who walk the earth, ensuring that the gods remain with them. You swallow hard, feeling a sense of resolve settle into your chest. You've come too far to turn back now. The scroll before you holds the key to Egypt's future, and with it, the fate of those who will follow in your footsteps. As a scribe, your job is not only to record the sacred texts but to ensure that they are carried forward, regardless of the risks. As you take the scroll from the high priest, you feel the weight of the task ahead of you. The words on the page are more than just ink on parchment. They are a call to action, a plea to the gods, and a promise that Egypt's legacy will live on. You will transcribe this prayer, no matter the cost. As you sit at your desk later that day, quill in hand, the room grows eerily quiet. The flickering flame of the candle seems to dance in the darkness, casting long shadows on the walls. The sound of your quill scratching across the parchment is the only noise in the room. You focus entirely on the scroll before you, the symbols taking shape beneath your hand. Each stroke of the quill feels like an invocation, each letter a step towards sealing Egypt's fate, and as the last word is written, you sit back, your heart racing. The prayer is complete. The final offering has been made. The evening air is thick with the scent of incense and burning oils as you step into the temple courtyard, the quiet hum of whispered prayers filling the space. The ritual is about to begin. The high priest has gathered a group of sacred priests, each draped in the customary linen garb, their faces masked in serene concentration. They gather around the altar, the golden vessel ready to receive the final offering, the scroll you've just completed. For a moment, you hesitate. The scroll feels heavier than any of the others you've worked on, a tangible weight in your hands. You've seen the dedication and faith with which the priests and worshippers have offered their prayers, but this one, this final offering, feels as though it holds the fate of Egypt itself. The high priest gives you a subtle nod. You take a deep breath, steadying yourself. It's time. You step forward, your feet barely making a sound against the stone floor. As you approach the altar, you feel as though the eyes of every god in the Egyptian pantheon are upon you. The temple seems to hold its breath. With trembling hands, you place the scroll onto the altar. It rests there, silently, awaiting the priest's blessing. The high priest steps forward, his hands raised in prayer. He speaks words in a low, rhythmic chant, invoking the powers of Osiris, Ra, and the other gods. The words vibrate through the air, almost tangible, resonating deep in your chest. Historians still argue whether ancient Egyptians believed in the direct intervention of gods in everyday matters. Some claim that the gods acted as intermediaries, guiding the fate of rulers and commoners alike, while others suggest that Egypt's devotion was more symbolic, rooted in the maintenance of cosmic order. But standing here, in the heart of this sacred space, you can't help but feel that something more is at play. Something beyond human understanding. The high priest's voice grows louder, more insistent. The chant becomes an almost hypnotic rhythm. As the words reach their crescendo, you hear the distinct sound of a distant bell tolling. It echoes across the temple grounds, a solemn reminder of the god's presence. The air shifts, and for a fleeting moment, you feel a strange chill, as if the very fabric of time is stretching and bending. You blink, your heart racing. A sense of unease creeps through your veins, but you force yourself to focus. This is what you've worked for, the culmination of everything you've done. The scroll is now fully blessed, and with the final words spoken, the high priest slowly lowers his arms. There's a moment of silence. Then, the high priest turns to you, his eyes sharp with an unreadable emotion. You have done your part, he says, his voice steady but thick with meaning. Now, we wait. A hush falls over the room. No one moves. It's as if the very air itself is holding its breath. You, too, wait, uncertain of what comes next. The gods have been invoked, the final offering made. But still, there's a sense that something is yet to unfold, something that will test your belief in what you've been taught, in what you've just participated in. The waiting feels endless. You glance at the scroll one last time. It lies there on the altar, the ink shimmering faintly in the torchlight. You've transcribed its every word, every symbol with meticulous care, as you always do. But this time, it feels different. The scroll is no longer just a religious text, it's a conduit to something much greater. You feel the weight of its power, and with it, the weight of responsibility. Historians still argue whether ancient Egyptians believed in the power of written words to shape reality. Some suggest that the act of writing was considered a divine act, capable of invoking the gods themselves. Others believe that writing was simply a means of preserving knowledge. But in this moment, as you stand before the altar, you can't help but wonder if there's more to the act of transcribing than mere documentation. Perhaps it is a form of prayer itself. Minutes pass. The priests, their faces set in solemn concentration, seem to feel the tension in the air as well. Finally, the high priest turns back to you, his expression softer now. "It is done," he says, his voice barely a whisper. "The gods will guide us." A heavy sigh of relief ripples through the room. The ritual is complete, the prayer has been offered, and Egypt's fate is now in the hands of the gods. You stand there for a moment, feeling the weight of the moment settle over you. The high priest begins to gather the other priests, and the altar is cleared of the scroll, but you can't shake the feeling that something isn't quite right. It's a small nagging thought, an unease that you can't quite name. Something about the ritual, about the feeling that there was something hidden in the prayer you transcribed, lingers in the back of your mind. You try to push the thought away as you leave the temple, but it remains. The weight of the scroll you've written for the gods, the sense of responsibility you've taken on, and the lingering doubts all seem to be pulling you deeper into the heart of Egypt's mysteries. What if the gods' intervention is not as gentle as you've always believed? What if the rituals you've followed all this time were more than just prayers and offerings, but something more powerful? Historians still argue whether the ancient Egyptians truly understood the power of their own rituals. Was the strength of their belief enough to summon divine intervention? Or were they simply practicing an elaborate form of social and religious theater? As you walk through the streets, the question lingers in your mind. The city feels different now. The noise of the market, the chatter of the crowds, all of it seems somehow distant, as though you're no longer fully part of it. You can't shake the feeling that Egypt's gods are watching, waiting, and as the sun dips below the horizon, casting long shadows over the city, you realize that your role in this grand cycle is far from over. Egypt's future, its very survival, rests on your shoulders. The weight of that responsibility feels heavier than ever. The next few days blur together, the events of the temple and the ritual replaying in your mind in fragments. You can't shake the nagging feeling that something has changed, but you're not sure what it is, or why it feels so unsettling. The familiar rhythm of your daily life, copying scrolls, reading ancient texts, serving the high priest, has lost its comfort. Every time you pick up your quill, the weight of the scroll you transcribed sits heavily in your mind. You try to immerse yourself in the tasks at hand, convincing yourself that this is just the natural result of completing such a sacred and intense ritual. But deep down, you know something more is afoot. You begin to notice small things, shadows that move when no one is there, whispers in the corners of the temple that fade before you can fully hear them. Your dreams are filled with images of Osiris and the other gods, their faces blurred and shifting, their voices echoing through the darkness. Historians still debate the role of dreams in Egyptian culture. Some argue that the ancient Egyptians believed dreams were messages from the gods, signs of divine favor or warning. Others suggest that dreams were simply the product of the mind's subconscious processing of the events of the day. But in your case, these dreams feel too vivid, too real, to be easily dismissed as mere figments of the imagination. They feel like a calling point. One evening, after the temple's daily rituals have concluded, you find yourself standing alone by the riverbank, staring out over the dark water. The soft lapping of the Nile against the shore is almost hypnotic, and the cool breeze offers a fleeting sense of peace. The world feels quieter now, as though the gods themselves are holding their breath. It's there, on the edge of the water, that you hear it. A voice. It's faint at first, like a whisper carried on the wind, but it grows clearer as the seconds pass. Your heart races, and you look around, but there is no one in sight. The voice seems to come from the water itself, the soft trickle of the river now layered with words that are at once foreign and familiar. It speaks your name, calling you, beckoning you closer. You feel a pull, an irresistible urge to step forward. The voice is gentle but insistent, promising answers, promising the knowledge of the gods themselves. The idea of turning away, of ignoring the call, feels wrong. As though you would be betraying something deep inside yourself. Historians often wonder whether the ancient Egyptians experienced similar encounters with the divine. Could they have heard the voices of gods as clearly as you hear your own thoughts? Some scholars argue that such encounters were reserved for pharaohs and priests, while others suggest that any devout follower could be called upon by the gods to receive their wisdom. But you are not a pharaoh, nor are you a high priest. You are a scribe, an observer, a recorder. So why are you hearing the voice now? Why are you being called? You take a hesitant step toward the water, and the voice grows louder, more distinct. Come, it urges softly. The knowledge you seek is within your reach. Come and see. The air around you begins to hum, vibrating with a power you cannot fully comprehend. Your breath catches in your throat as the world seems to shift, the edges of reality blurring. The river before you no longer seems like water but like a mirror to another world. You feel a surge of fear, but it is quickly replaced with a deeper, more profound sense of curiosity, a longing to understand, to know what lies beyond the veil of the visible world. You take another step. The river is closer now, the edge of the bank just within your reach. And then, the voice, stronger, more insistent, whispers one last time, trust in the gods. Trust in what you have done. Come to the water. A strange sense of calm washes over you. You kneel by the water's edge, your hand reaching out toward the surface, your fingers brushing against the cool surface. As soon as you touch the water, everything changes. The sound of the river fades, replaced by a low, rumbling hum. The air thickens, and a brilliant light bursts from the water, blinding you for an instant. When the light recedes, you find yourself standing in a place you've never seen before, a place that is not of this world. The landscape around you is surreal, almost dreamlike. The sky is dark, yet filled with stars, brighter than you've ever seen. The land stretches out in every direction, bathed in a soft, otherworldly glow. You look down at your feet and see that the ground is made of soft, glowing sand, stretching endlessly before you. Before you can comprehend what is happening, you hear the voice again, now unmistakably clear. Welcome, scribe. Welcome to the realm of the gods. You stand frozen, trying to process what is unfolding around you. This place, it feels like the boundary between life and death, between the mortal world and the divine. You are not sure whether you are dreaming or awake, but the reality of the situation is undeniable. You have been chosen, the voice continues, its tone filled with ancient wisdom. The gods have heard your transcriptions, your offerings. They have seen your devotion. And now, they offer you a gift, the gift of knowledge. The voice falls silent, and in the stillness, you feel an overwhelming sense of awe. The air itself seems to pulse with power, as though the very universe is holding its breath. Historians have long speculated about the true nature of the gods' realm, wondering whether such mystical places were purely symbolic or whether they existed as real, physical locations. Many believe that the idea of such realms was a way for the Egyptians to explain the mysteries of the afterlife. But standing here, in the midst of this strange and beautiful place, you can't help but feel that the boundaries between the real world and the divine are thinner than anyone ever imagined. The voice returns, this time softer, gentler. You are ready. Take the knowledge. Take the power. And in that moment, you understand that this is your destiny, to be the bridge between the mortal and divine worlds, to record not just the words of the gods but their very essence. You have been given the ultimate gift, the gift of immortality. The weight of the knowledge you've just received settles in your mind, profound and undeniable. It feels as though the very fabric of the universe has unraveled before you, revealing truths too vast for the mortal mind to comprehend. You're standing in a place that seems outside of time, where past, present, and future blur into one continuous moment. The light around you pulses with an energy that is both gentle and overwhelming. You look around and see the shadows of gods in the corners of your vision, flickering like flames in the darkness. Their forms are indistinct, like echoes of their true selves, but the presence is undeniable. They are here. They are watching. And they have chosen you. The voice speaks once more, its tone calm and filled with purpose. You have transcribed the words of the gods, scribe. You have offered your devotion. Now, you must carry forth the knowledge. You must preserve it for future generations, so that the wisdom of the gods endures. You feel the enormity of this task settling over you. It is no longer just about copying ancient texts. No, this is different. The knowledge you hold now is not merely written, it is lived. It is embedded in your very soul. You are no longer just a scribe, you are a vessel, chosen to carry the divine message into the world, but as you absorb this revelation, a part of you feels a deep sadness. The world you once knew, the bustling streets of Egypt, the temple rituals, the familiar faces of your fellow scribes, feels impossibly distant. The life you led, though filled with purpose, seems small in comparison to the vastness of what you now understand. The world of gods and mortals has always been separate, but now it feels like that boundary has been erased, leaving you suspended between two realms. Historians often debate whether the ancient Egyptians believed that their priests and scribes could cross into the divine realm during their lifetimes. Some suggest that only pharaohs had the privilege of communing directly with the gods, while others propose that the priests themselves may have had moments of divine revelation. But whatever the truth, you know now that what you are experiencing is real. The gods are not distant, unreachable figures, they are present, active, and aware. The light around you dims for a moment, and you feel a shift in the air. Something stirs in the distance, and when you turn, you see a figure emerging from the shadows. It is the high priest, but not the man you know. This figure is more than human, its form is radiant, almost ethereal, glowing with a soft light that seems to come from within. You understand at once that this is not a physical being. This is the manifestation of a god, an emissary sent to guide you on this journey. You have been given much, scribe, the high priest's voice reverberates through the air. But with this gift comes great responsibility. The knowledge you carry is powerful, but it is also dangerous. The gods themselves fear the consequences of their wisdom falling into the wrong hands. The words chill you to the core. You feel the weight of the knowledge you now hold, and for the first time, you wonder whether you are truly ready for this. The power to shape the future, to influence the course of history, it is both a blessing and a curse. The balance between life and death, the godly figure continues, is delicate. You must be careful with what you reveal and when. The world is not yet ready to bear the full weight of divine knowledge. The realization hits you like a thunderclap. This knowledge is not just about preserving the past, it is about shaping the future. You have the power to influence the course of history itself. The scribes and priests of Egypt may have spent centuries recording the deeds of the pharaohs and the lives of the gods, but none of them have ever been entrusted with the kind of power you now wield. As the figure steps closer, you notice something you hadn't before, a faint, shimmering thread of light that stretches from the figure to you. It connects you, and you feel a strange, unspoken understanding pass between you. The gods have given you this gift because they believe in you, but they also fear what you might do with it. You are no longer just a passive observer. You are a participant in the divine order, and that comes with consequences. The figure raises a hand, and the light around you grows brighter, filling the space with a soft, almost overwhelming glow. Your task is not yet complete. The knowledge must be shared, but it must also be hidden. The world must be guided, but not overwhelmed. You nod, the gravity of the moment settling over you. This is your charge now, to carry the divine knowledge, to protect it, and to decide how and when it will be shared with the world. You will be the keeper of this secret, the guardian of a truth too powerful for most to bear, but as the light fades and the figure disappears, you feel a sense of calm wash over you. The knowledge may be heavy, but it is also a gift that will allow you to transcend the mortal realm, to touch the divine, and to guide the future of Egypt. You understand now that your life will never be the same. You are no longer just a scribe in the temple, you are the bridge between the gods and the people. As the final remnants of the divine realm fade, you find yourself back on the riverbank, the cool night air once again caressing your skin. The stars above you shine brightly, as though acknowledging the sacred task you now carry. You are alone, yet you are not. You have seen the gods, spoken with them, and now you are part of their eternal plan. Historians still argue whether the ancient Egyptians truly believed in the power of their scribes to influence the gods, or whether such stories were simply allegories for the unexplainable mysteries of life. But standing here, on the banks of the Nile, you know the truth. The gods are real. And you, chosen scribe, are their messenger. The weight of the knowledge you carry is heavy, but as the night wraps around you like a blanket, you feel an overwhelming sense of peace. You are part of something much larger than yourself now. The future is uncertain, but for the first time, you are ready to face it. Now, as you stand beneath the vast Egyptian sky, you understand that the journey ahead is not just one of survival. It is one of purpose, a purpose that will echo through the ages.